The story starts where our protagonist Theo reflects on his past, thinking that if his life was always going to be this miserable, he wishes he'd never been born at all. Right until the moment, the story jumps back to his days in the unit. Captain Bram screams Theo's name, demanding to know how long it takes just to haul some water. Bram yells at him to quit screwing around. Theo, carrying two heavy buckets, apologizes to Captain Bram and promises to bring it right away. But Bram isn't satisfied and growls menacingly as he approaches. Suddenly, Bram delivers a brutal kick to Theo's side, shouting that he's late. Theo goes flying with a grunt of pain and watches in horror as the water spills all over the ground. Bram stands over him, screaming that he's a useless piece of trash who can't even carry a cup of water. Terrified, Theo stays on the ground and apologizes profusely, offering to fetch more immediately. Back at the well, Theo hauls up another heavy bucket by hand. He mutters to himself that he could easily just use magic to get the water, annoyed that they're making him do physical labor instead. As he looks up at the fortress walls, he wonders how long this hellish life is going to continue, knowing exactly what event started his downward spiral. In a flashback to when Theo first joined the unit, he walks into a tent carrying a torch and freezes. He finds Captain Bram on top of a female knight, holding her down while she struggles. Bram tells her to stop squirming and claims he's about to make her feel good. Theo, in total shock, calls out his captain's name, realizing he has just witnessed Bram assaulting a comrade. The scene shifts to a courtroom where a judge declares that attacking a comrade is an unforgivable act. He addresses Theo directly and sentences him to death. Theo yells for them to wait, desperately pleading that he said it over and over. He only witnessed the crime, and Captain Bram is the real culprit. A guard shouts at Theo to shut up. Bram, standing freely nearby, smugly mocks Theo for trying to pin his own sins on others. A court official seals Theo's fate, stating they have testimony confirming Theo is the one who committed the crime. In the courtroom, Theo stares in disbelief as he says Ferris's name. The narration reveals that the victim's own testimony was the deciding factor, sealing his fate. Theo can't understand why she decided to frame him as the culprit. But just as his guilt is confirmed, Bram launches his petition. He stands before the court, swearing to take responsibility for the rookie's outrageous behavior and promising to reform him if they let him watch over Theo for life. The higher-ups, desperate to avoid tarnishing the knight's reputation with a scandal, give their approval to this arrangement. 4 years pass, and Theo has effectively become Bram's slave. He narrates that for all this time, he hasn't just been doing cooking, laundry, and cleaning chores, but he has also served as a stress relief toy for Bram to beat on. He admits there were days when he felt his spirit would break completely. However, he finds a small moment of solace while cooking, noting that it's the one thing he actually enjoys. He tastes a soup he's making with a seasoning called shoyu. He thinks that while it's a bit salty, it's useful and decides he might buy more at the market. He takes another sip and decides it's not bad at all. Suddenly, Bram appears and pours a drink directly into the stew, ruining it completely. He aggressively asks how long Theo is going to take just to make dinner. Theo panics and apologizes to Captain Bram, promising to get the plating done right away. But Bram isn't interested in food. He kicks the pot over, spilling the hot stew everywhere, and screams that they don't need that crap, calling Theo an idiot. He then turns to address the rest of the squad. Bram announces to his men that the Bram squad will move out tomorrow to take on the task of exterminating a monster. The soldiers discuss the details, noting that a request came in after huge footprints were found near the eastern village, with the threat estimated at rank B. Someone mentions that adventurers are also moving to intercept it. Hearing this, Bram loses it. He declares that in the name of their knightly honor, the credit must go to the Bram squad. He violently kicks Theo again, calling him an idiot for taste testing when they need to be preparing for the mission. Bram continues his assault, punching Theo and shouting that it's weaklings like him that drag down the whole squad's morale. He's paranoid that those damn adventurers might steal the credit for the job. He delivers another kick to Theo, screaming that this is all his fault. In the background, Bram yells at his men to listen up, asserting that they are the ones who will take down the monsters no matter what. Left bleeding on the ground, Theo simply mutters a curse. Later, the squad is on the move through the forest. One soldier boasts that he'll definitely make a name for himself on this mission, while his comrade scoffs, telling him he'd get taken down instantly. The boastful soldier insists he'll finish the enemy in one strike with his secret sword, but his friend mocks him for practicing against scarecrows. As they march, the narration notes that in the peaceful kingdom of Lystria, conflicts are extremely rare, and adventurers usually handle any issues that do arise. While everyone else gets worked up about finally seeing real action, Theo hauls a massive heavy pack and thinks that if the world is peaceful, that's actually the best thing possible. While the squad moves forward, Theo notices something disturbing on the ground. He mutters to himself as he inspects the dirt, realizing that the footprints there are way too big for any normal creature. He starts sweating, wondering exactly what size of monster leaves tracks like that. Meanwhile, the other soldiers are completely oblivious. They notice a massive shadow casting over them and dumbly ask if those are clouds, wondering if it's about to rain. Theo looks up in horror and realizes instantly that it's definitely not a cloud. A massive dragon descends right in front of them, confirming Theo's worst fears. The narration points out that this isn't just any beast, it's a dragon, a ridiculously dangerous monster that's classified as at least A rank. Chaos erupts immediately. The soldiers scream in terror and start running for their lives. Captain Bram initially tries to act tough, yelling at his men to stop being idiots and keep their formation. But the second the dragon roars and snaps its jaws near him, Bram's courage evaporates. His face twists in fear, and he immediately pulls a 180, screaming at the driver to get the carriage moving right now and ordering a full retreat. Bram scrambles onto the fleeing carriage while Theo runs alongside it, desperate not to be left behind. Theo calls out, begging to ride the carriage too. Bram looks down at him with a twisted, malicious grin, thinking that this is actually his perfect chance to get rid of a loose end. He calls Theo's name in a mocking tone and tells him he really has perfect timing. As Theo reaches out his hand pleading with the captain, Bram violently kicks him square in the face. The force of the kick sends Theo flying backward toward the monster. As the carriage speeds away to safety, Bram shouts back at him to make his worthless life count by acting as a decoy. Left alone in the dirt, Theo stares up into the jaws of the beast. He wonders if he's going to die, but a part of him is strangely resigned to it. He thinks that with the miserable life he's been living anyway, maybe it doesn't even matter if it ends here. The dragon lunges to devour him, but just as its jaws are about to close, a blade flashes out of nowhere. A powerful strike intercepts the dragon's attack right in front of Theo's face, blocking the bite in the nick of time. The scene explodes into violence as the blade connects. With a single devastating strike, the massive dragon is torn apart, blood spraying everywhere as the beast is instantly destroyed. Standing over the massive corpse, the silver-haired girl calmly declares that it's over. Theo stares at her, completely dumbfounded, processing the fact that she just felled a dragon in a single blow. He looks at her and suddenly connects the dots, remembering rumors of a woman with white silver hair and stunning beauty, the legendary Silver Princess, Ray Silverhorn. Theo starts sweating, realizing this is the adventurer he's heard about, the one who handles S-rank monsters like they're nothing. Ray turns to him and asks if he's hurt. Theo stammers out a thank you, but Ray dismisses it. She explains that she didn't really save him on purpose. The dragon was her prey to begin with. She tells him she took a request far to the west, but the thing escaped and she's been chasing it all the way here. Suddenly, a massive growling noise erupts from her stomach. Ray looks away, totally embarrassed, and tells Theo she doesn't like polite speech, so he should just call her Ray. Theo asks if she's feeling unwell, but quickly realizes what the noise meant and asks if she's hungry. Ray admits she's been chasing the dragon for a week straight without eating or drinking anything. Theo is horrified, asking what kind of stomach she has to survive a week like that. He tries to explain that usually, adventurers just collect the scales and claws, but Ray is already staring intently at the dragon meat. Theo panics and tells her to wait, explaining that magical beasts have magic power in their flesh, so you can't just eat it unless you purify the meat with holy water first. Ray simply asks if holy water is all it takes to make it edible. She pulls out an ornate glass bottle and asks if they can use it. Theo's eyes nearly pop out of his head. It's supreme holy water. He starts fanboying over it, shouting that the craftsmanship is the real deal and that even the empty bottle is worth a fortune. Ray watches him geek out and asks if this means they can finally eat. Theo snaps back to reality, apologizes for the delay, and confirms that with water this high grade he can start cooking immediately. Ray looks at Theo with big, hopeful eyes and asks if he'll handle the cooking. She openly admits that she has never done housework in her life and definitely can't handle it now. Theo thinks to himself that he'd love to make her do it if she actually could, but seeing her helplessness, he caves. He smiles and tells her he'll do it, explaining that it's just a habit ingrained from his time with the knights. Ray offers to pay him for the labor since she's not helping, but Theo panics and refuses the money. He reminds her that she is literally his lifesaver, so he definitely isn't going to charge her. Ray insists she wants to thank him somehow, but Theo holds his ground. Theo gets to work on the massive dragon corpse. He realizes the knife won't even scratch the surface unless he guides it along the cuts Ray already made. He marvels at the durability of the dragon scales, wondering just how much raw power Ray must have to cleave through something this tough in a single strike. With a final heave, a massive block of meat breaks loose. Theo wipes the sweat from his brow and declares that he got the piece off. Holding the bottle of supreme holy water, Theo tells Ray he's going to pour it over the meat. As the liquid hits the dragon flesh, it hisses and steams, stripping away the dangerous magical energy. Once the reaction settles, Theo flashes a bright smile and announces that the purification is complete. Ray, who has been starving this whole time, immediately pops up and asks if she can finally eat. Theo goes into full chef mode, explaining the process as he works. He tells her first to start a fire in the pit, then add spices and herbs to the meat before covering it with hot stones. He tells her they have to wait a little longer, as he covers the whole thing with large, thick leaves to trap the heat. Ray watches him work, genuinely impressed, and tells him he's really good at this. Theo's expression dims a little. He admits that he's been doing this exact kind of work in the Knight's Order for a long time. He thinks to himself that his role as a glorified servant has really sunk in now. Just then, the sound of a carriage rumbling down the road catches their attention. Theo notes that he saw the vehicle a while ago. Ray turns to him and asks if those people in the carriage are his comrades. Theo freezes. The words hit him hard. He confirms that Bram and the others are indeed his comrades, but his face goes completely dark. He thinks about how he has to return to the Night Order after this meal. The reality of going back to his abusers weighs on him heavily as Ray says his name to snap him out of it. Ray leans in close, invading his personal space to look at his face. She comments that he looks like he's in a lot of pain. She reaches out and gently touches the bruise on his cheek, correctly deducing that the wound wasn't caused by a monster. She asks him if something happened between him and his comrades. Theo flinches and pulls away defensively, stammering that it's nothing. Ray backs off immediately, assuring him that it's okay if he doesn't want to talk about it. She tells him that she respects people who have abilities she lacks. Since Theo has skills that she doesn't, she looks him in the eye and tells him that she respects him. Theo decides to open up about his past. He warns Ray that if she listens to his story, she should just stop him if it gets boring. After sharing the heavy details of his betrayal and abuse, he looks down and asks her if she's disillusioned yet. Ray smiles gently and tells him no. She thanks him for telling her, adding that he's really amazing. Theo is stunned that she listened, but Ray continues, saying she heard that talking about the past takes courage. Theo starts tearing up, realizing that even though his world hasn't changed, a massive weight has been lifted from his chest just because she listened. He wipes his tears, admitting to himself that maybe he just needed someone to hear him out. Pulling himself together, he quickly changes the subject and announces that the meat should be done. The pot is steaming perfectly. Theo calls out that the timing is perfect, and Ray notes that it smells nice. Theo takes a quick sample to check the quality and confirms it feels good. Ray jokingly asks if he just tasted it to check for poison, but Theo clarifies that it's strictly a taste test. Theo plates the food, telling her that he can't serve bad food to his lifesaver. He urges her to eat. Ray stares at the glistening meat, mesmerized, and says she can tell it's delicious just by looking at it. Theo notes that presentation is part of the flavor. Ray politely thanks him for the meal and digs in. Ray takes one bite and is instantly in heaven. She blushes, completely blown away by the flavor. She rambles on about how hard it is to believe dragon meat could taste this good, analyzing how the cooking enhanced the umami and praising the presentation. She declares that she is convinced now. Theo looks at her, a bit confused by what she means. Ray looks him dead in the eye with a serious expression. She says, "You." Then, without breaking eye contact, she declares, "I want." Theo is so shocked by the sudden declaration that his brain short-circuits and the piece of meat on his fork drops right onto the ground. Theo completely misinterprets her declaration and starts stammering, asking what she means by wanting him. Ray talks right past his confusion, stuffing her face as she explains that she can't do housework, so she wants to entrust her home to him. She casually drops the salary offer, 100,000 gold a month. Theo loses it, yelling that it's way too much money. Ray misunderstands his reaction, thinking he's offended by the low ball, and immediately offers to pay more if that's not enough. Theo gets serious, cutting through the negotiation to remind her that even if he went back to the Knights, there's no place left for him there. Ray reaches her hand out to him with a gentle smile and tells him that she will be his place to belong. Theo is taken aback and stammers a thank you, but he still hesitates. Ray sees the hesitation and immediately goes into panic mode, yelling that if the money isn't enough, she'll give him more. Theo has to shout back that money isn't what he's talking about. Theo tries to push her away for her own good. He yells that his whole tragic story could be a total lie. He asks her what she would do if he turned out to be a bad person, insisting that trusting him is impossible. Ray calmly shuts him down, stating that she can tell when people lie. She holds a finger up, adding that a bad person couldn't possibly make food this delicious. That's her special skill. Ray gets real with him in the quiet forest. She tells him that listening to his story helped her understand how hard things have been for him, and she admits she feels sympathy. But she clarifies that it's also true she needs the benefits he can provide. She tells him plainly that the one who has to choose is him. Theo repeats the word choose, and Ray confirms it would be best if he picked her. As Theo stands there processing the idea of doing housework for 100,000 gold a month, Ray starts sweating, terrified that he thinks the deal is too sweet and suspects a scam. Ray starts to ask what he's going to do, but Theo cuts her off, declaring loud and clear that he'll take her up on the offer. In his head, he accepts that his life was already over anyway, so from now on, he'll use it for her sake. Ray beams, saying she's happy, and reintroduces herself properly as Ray Silverhorn. Theo introduces himself just as Theo. They seal the deal with a handshake. Later, they arrive at a building. Theo looks around in shock and asks Ray where on earth this place is. She casually tells him it's her house. The place is an absolute disaster zone, with trash and clutter piled up everywhere like a landfill. Theo stares in horror, asking if she seriously calls this a house. Ray looks away and whistles innocently, reminding him that she explicitly told him she can't do housework. Theo realizes with a sinking feeling that even at 100,000 gold a month, he might have sold himself short. Early the next morning, Theo is already hard at work scrubbing down the filthy house. He wipes the sweat from his forehead and takes a step back to admire his progress. He declares with satisfaction that, for the time being, the kitchen is finally usable again. Ray walks into the room, letting out a massive yawn. She rubs the sleep from her eyes and asks Theo if he's been up all night cleaning. Theo cheerfully replies that since he got hired, he has to make sure he works properly to earn his keep. Ray looks confused by the concept of work, but then her eyes finally focus on the room. She shouts in shock that everything is sparkling clean. Theo deadpans that she's a little slow on the uptake, considering she's been standing there for a minute. Theo decides it's time for a break and suggests they have some tea. He checks a jar of tea leaves, muttering that they should still be fine to use. As they sit down with their cups, Ray gets curious about his past. She asks him directly why he decided to join the Knights in the first place. Theo opens up about his history. He explains that when he was little, his parents were killed by monsters. He quickly adds that he was born in a remote village, and it's a common story in the countryside, so it's nothing unusual. He recalls that the villagers helped him get back on his feet at first. But as time went on, he felt like they were still strangers to him. He admits that maybe it was because he was just a child, but the awkwardness of everyone tiptoeing around him made it impossible to stay. He tells her that's how he ended up leaving the village. He explains that his parents had left behind some savings, so he took that money and used it to enroll in the Knight Academy, seeking a new path. Theo laughs off the heaviness of the story, admitting that for a while he even thought about avenging his parents, which was totally out of character for him. He looks at Ray with a soft expression and tells her that, despite everything, he's grateful she rescued him. He tries to brush off any pity, but Ray interrupts the moment. She smiles warmly, calls his name, and simply thanks him for coming to her place. Theo and Ray are walking through the busy city market, and they're definitely turning heads. The crowd starts whispering immediately, recognizing the famous Silver Princess, Ray Silverhorn. People are amazed by her beauty, but their attention shifts to Theo with suspicion, wondering who the guy walking next to her is. Theo feels the pressure, thinking to himself that while Ray brought him here to report the dragon and show him around, the intensity of everyone's stares is actually painful. Feeling the heat, Theo nervously apologizes, noting that being with him seems to be drawing extra attention. He comments that she's seriously famous. Ray stays humble, replying that it's nothing and she's just an S rank. But Theo knows better. He reflects that to even reach A rank requires achievements massive enough for a royal letter of commendation. Someone like Ray, an S-rank adventurer, is a rarity that maybe only appears once in 10,000 people. Theo declares that she is truly a national treasure. Ray looks at him with genuine confusion, asking what he means by national treasure. Realizing he's being a bit too intense, Theo quickly says never mind and drops it. Just then they arrive at a large building with a sign marking it as the Adventurers Guild. Theo announces they've arrived. As they enter, Theo remembers his time as a knight. He recalls how his old unit, especially Captain Bram, always looked down on those adventurers and they were constantly at odds. But inside the guild, the vibe is totally different. The entire room erupts into cheers the moment they see Ray. Adventurers crowd around shouting welcome back and fanboying over her beauty. Ray just looks slightly annoyed by the overwhelming reception. With the crowd still roaring her name, Theo asks Ray if she's sure about this chaos. Ray just says, as always, used to the noise. They make it to the reception desk where a female staff member greets Ray and asks what brings her in. Ray gets straight to business, stating she completed the request and wants her reward. The receptionist checks the paperwork for the dragon slaying quest and asks if Ray has the materials to prove it. Ray simply says she'll bring it out now and holds up a tiny box. Suddenly, thud, a massive dragon's head materializes out of nowhere, slamming onto the counter. The receptionist stares blankly at the severed head, confirming it's real. Theo watches the reaction, thinking back to yesterday when he saw Ray's magic item box suck in the entire dragon corpse. It blew his mind then, and it's still pretty crazy to see now. Ray mentions she also has the dragon's body to turn in, which sends the receptionist into an immediate panic. The receptionist frantically tells her to wait, insisting that the guild hall is fine as is and they'll send a team to collect the corpse later. Ray asks if she can just summon it right there, but the receptionist hits her with a firm nope. Theo stands there imagining the absolute disaster if Ray summoned a massive dragon in such a cramped room, it would destroy the building. Moving on to business, the receptionist presents 3 heavy bags of gold. Announcing the reward is 1 million G, the receptionist notes that this is just a preliminary estimate, and the exact calculation will come later. Ray nods and asks to deposit the bulk of it with the guild as usual, deciding to only keep 100,000 G on hand. While this financial transaction happens, Theo is doing some mental math in the background. He realizes that since a low-ranking knight only earns about 200,000 G, the reward for this single dragon hunt is worth more than 16 years of a knight's salary. As he watches Ray, he can only think that the scale of an S-rank adventurer is completely unbelievable. Suddenly, Ray turns and hands a bag of gold straight to Theo, telling him here's 1 million G. She explains casually that she forgot to pay his advance for the month, so she's giving it to him now. Theo freaks out, panic-stricken that she's handing over that kind of cash right in the middle of the guild hall. The crowd immediately starts whispering, wondering what the hell this guy is to Ray and why she's giving him money. Feeling the eyes of the jealous mob on him, Theo nervously thanks her but urgently suggests they get out of there right now. Later, they head to the market. Theo is genuinely excited by the produce, commenting on how fresh everything looks. Ray seems confused, asking why they need to buy food when they still have plenty of dragon meat. Theo explains that just eating meat gets boring and that cooking is about the harmony of ingredients. Ray stares at him blankly for a second before simply replying that she sees his point. They stop at a vegetable stand run by a massive, intense-looking shopkeeper who asks what they're planning to make. Ray points to Theo and explains that he's the one doing the cooking, so Theo awkwardly introduces himself. The shopkeeper lends in, noting he hasn't seen Theo's face before. Ray then casually drops a verbal bomb, stating that they've decided to start living together. The shopkeeper completely misunderstands, shouting in shock that he can't believe Ray actually brought her husband along. Theo frantically waves his hands, desperate to clear up the husband misunderstanding, but the damage is done. Just then a voice calls out Alvin, and a handsome man in shining armor approaches. He looks at Theo with sharp eyes and asks Ray who this man is. Ray performs the introductions with her usual lack of tact, telling Alvin, "This is Theo, we live together." She then introduces the newcomer to Theo, explaining that Alvin is a member of her family. Theo mentally notes that a family is a group formed among adventurers, essentially a clan or party. He tries to stammer out a "nice to meet you," but the atmosphere is definitely tense. Alvin immediately gets physical, grabbing Theo by the collar and sizing him up with a look of pure disgust. He says he can't understand it at all. He demands to know why Ray would be with a man like this. As he glares at Theo, he scoffs, calling him a weakling and concluding that the two of them are far too mismatched. Ray orders Alvin to let go of Theo's hand immediately. Alvin ignores her with a creepy, condescending smile, telling her not to worry and that it'll all be over soon. Ray yells his name in warning. Alvin starts rambling obsessively, ranting that the strong ones are the only ones who belong by her side. Ray has heard enough. Her expression turns terrifyingly dark as she commands him one last time to let go. The confrontation turns violent as Theo is thrown hard against the ground. Alvin stands over him, looking down with a sneer, and asks if he can't even take a defensive stance, calling him pathetic. But before Alvin can do anything else, Ray steps between them. She radiates a menacing aura and warns Alvin that if he goes any further, she won't forgive him. Alvin looks genuinely shocked, asking if she's really going to raise her hand against her own family. Ray doesn't back down. She states coldly that it was Alvin who ignored her demand first. With intense focus, she declares that whoever tries to harm Theo deals with her. Realizing he's lost this round, Alvin turns away in frustration, shouting about what could possibly be so good about a guy like Theo and storms off cursing. With Alvin retreating, Ray turns her attention back to Theo and asks if he's okay. Theo is still shaken but manages to stammer out his relief. Ray apologizes for the scene, explaining casually that Alvin can be a bit emotional. Theo stares at her, thinking that if that was just emotional, the standards for her family must be completely different from normal humans. He mentally pictures them as literal monsters while questioning her definition of a bit. Ray gently takes Theo's face in her hand, looking deeply concerned. She tells him that doing something like that to him is something she'll never forgive. Theo blushes, overwhelmed by her care, and wonders if it's really okay for him to be treated this kindly. Suddenly, the vegetable shopkeeper bursts into tears in the background. He's moved by what he thinks is their beautiful married love. Calling himself Uncle Bartle, he tells them to take as much as they want as a gift. Theo just stands there, realizing that this intense misunderstanding is exactly why they definitely aren't a married couple. Theo gets to work in the kitchen, washing vegetables under the running tap. He chops them up on a cutting board with a steady rhythm before tossing everything into a hot pan to sizzle. He seems completely overwhelmed by the quality of the cookware. Tears of joy stream down his face as he realizes you can cook everything at the same time in this pan. He notes that Ray apparently bought exactly the one she was told to buy. He mentally sends his thanks to whoever recommended this wonderful cooking gadget. As he watches the food simmer, he observes that the meat stays thick while the vegetables turn out chunky and juicy to match. Focusing on the finer details, Theo decides to use rice that is light and not too sweet to pair with the meal. He mentions that he picked up all sorts of ingredients at the market for this. Now he moves to the finishing touch. The spice. He explains his method, centering the flavor on spiciness, topping it with bitterness, and adding fragrance and a touch of sweetness as an accent. He pumps himself up to go all out. The dish is finally plated, looking rich and hearty. Theo announces that it's done. Ray sits at the table, staring at the food with intense focus and says it smells incredible. With Alvin and Theo joining her, they agree to start eating. Ray takes a spoonful of the stew and puts it in her mouth. Her reaction is immediate, her eyes sparkle and she blushes, thinking that it's absolutely delicious. She breaks down the flavor profile in her mind, noting how the dragon meat, which was already great on its own, mixes perfectly with the crunch of the vegetables and the spices to create something unbelievable. She declares that this taste is pure harmony. Theo smiles and thanks her, saying she's surprisingly good at expressing things when the food is this good. Suddenly, Ray decides she needs to go hunt more dragons immediately. Theo panics, warning her that dragons will go extinct if she does that, and reminds her they still have plenty of meat left. Ray ignores the concern, stating flatly that when this supply is gone, she'll hunt more because she is definitely eating this dish again. Theo watches Ray chowing down on her food. He notes that even though she looks totally innocent while eating, he knows the power inside her is unbelievable. She immediately holds out her empty plate and demands another helping. Theo agrees and goes to serve her. As he works, he realizes that cooking today was genuinely fun, probably because for the first time, he made the meal for someone else. Later that evening, outside the mansion, a girl with twintails stands on a ridge overlooking the property. She hums thoughtfully as she watches the house, noting that Ray has finally returned. The next morning arrives with the sun pouring down on the mansion. The peaceful atmosphere is immediately shattered when someone screams out a loud denial from inside the house. In the bedroom, Theo begins to wake up, groaning as he opens his eyes. His vision clears and he instantly freezes in panic. Ray is fast asleep, cuddling right on top of him in the same bed. Theo starts stammering, completely freaking out as he looks at her sleeping face. He frantically tries to piece together his memory, recalling that he and Ray were cleaning the bedroom late last night and he had mentioned being tired. He realizes he must have passed out right there. As the reality sets in, he mentally screams, wondering how the hell he ended up in this situation. He tells himself he needs to figure out a way through this crisis immediately. Very carefully, he slides his body out from under the covers without waking her. Once he's clear, he breathes a sigh of relief, declaring himself safe. He takes off running down the hall, thinking that if Ray misunderstands what happened, he won't just get fired. His life might actually be over. Suddenly, he skids to a halt as he notices a visitor has arrived. Theo opens the front door to greet the visitor, stammering out a polite good morning. The visitor, a girl with twintails, doesn't bother with greetings. She just looks at him with a disgusted expression and asks if he's an acquaintance of Ray. Before Theo can really answer, the girl starts bawling her eyes out and screams "traitor" at the top of her lungs. A flashback reveals the source of her drama. Apparently, she and Ray had a pact that since no good men ever showed up, they would both give up on love forever and just focus on work. She points an accusing finger, sobbing that Ray has totally betrayed their agreement. Just then, Ray's voice calls out from inside the house, asking Theo what's wrong. Theo turns to Ray, trying to explain that this crazy visitor is losing it, but Ray just calmly recognizes the girl as Canon, noting that she's as noisy as ever. Canon isn't here to talk, though. She yells at Ray for showing her face so shamelessly and immediately unleashes a massive torrent of fire magic. She screams about Ray sneaking ahead of her in the romance department while Theo panics, realizing he's caught in the crossfire of a lethal attack. Ray doesn't even flinch. She simply remarks that Canon is being too loud and casually backhands the magical attack, and Canon along with it. The force of the slap sends the girl flying through the air away from the mansion. Theo watches the girl launch into the stratosphere and nervously tells Ray that she might have overdone it. A moment later, Canon is back on the ground, crying hysterically and still shouting about betrayal. Theo, looking concerned, asks if she's actually unharmed. Ray takes a moment to properly introduce the weeping mess. This is Canon Portlift, a member of her family clan and an S-rank adventurer just like her. After a quick off-screen explanation that Theo is just an employee, Canon's mood flips instantly. She laughs loudly, declaring that it was all just a big misunderstanding. Canon wipes her tears, looking completely relieved. She tells herself she should have known better. There's no way Ray could ever actually get a boyfriend. But Ray, having zero social awareness, immediately drops a bomb. She mentions that she did sleep next to Theo yesterday. Canon freezes, her face turning pale as she stammers, thinking the worst. Theo immediately starts screaming in a panic, clarifying that they literally just slept side by side and absolutely nothing else happened. Ray ignores the chaos she just caused and asks Canon why she came over in the first place. Canon snaps to attention, remembering her mission. A new floor has appeared in the labyrinth, and she's here to drag Ray along for a dive. Canon is still screaming at Ray, asking if she's the type of person who treats her friends like trash the moment she gets a boyfriend. Ray calmly replies that she was just kidding and remembers their pact properly, though she adds a silent thought that she thinks she remembers it. Canon then turns her attention to Theo, confirming his name and asking if he's coming to the labyrinth with them. Theo awkwardly smiles and declines, saying he'll pass. He gestures to the pile of junk around him, explaining that he has a very important job to do. Theo steps into one of the rooms and is immediately hit with a reality check. He stammers as he looks out at a literal sea of garbage and clutter filling the space. Narration notes that Ray apparently just dumped whatever she was given straight onto the floor without a second thought. But instead of being discouraged, Theo rolls up his sleeves. He notes that this will be quite the cleanup, but he shouts out that he's starting with sorting. Ironically, he's exactly the type of guy who gets fired up by a mess like this. Meanwhile, deep in the rocky cave of the labyrinth, Canon and Ray are walking. Canon asks why Ray decided to let Theo live with her. She points out that Ray has always kept people at a distance, so she wants to know what possessed her to suddenly live alone with a guy. Ray thinks for a moment. She mentions that the food he made was delicious, but then gets to the real reason. She says Theo actually looked at her. Canon is stunned by the simple answer and screams, asking if that's really all it took. Ray just shrugs, saying she hasn't thought about it that deeply. Ray elaborates while thinking back to her conversation with Theo. She explains that unlike everyone else who only sees the S-rank adventurer, Theo spoke to her as a person. He talked passionately about what he loved in his own words, and she admits that maybe that made her happy. Canon bursts out laughing, teasing Ray that she's basically just bragging about her boyfriend now. Ray immediately turns cold, stating that she wasted her time trying to explain and walks ahead. Canon has to jog to catch up. Suddenly, Canon loses her footing and falls down a drop with a scream. She lands on the ground with a thud, and Ray, who is already there, scolds her for being careless. As giant insect monsters start crawling out of the shadows, Canon snaps back, telling Ray to shut up and that she doesn't need to be told she's clumsy. The two are quickly surrounded by a swarm of massive ants and beetles. A giant monster lunges forward to bite them, while Canon yells that she knows she's careless without Ray telling her. In a split second, a massive slash cuts through the air, obliterating the enemy instantly. The scene then abruptly cuts from the violence of the dungeon to the peaceful hallway of the mansion, where Theo is rhythmically pushing a mop, happily cleaning the floor. Back in the mansion, Theo wipes the sweat from his forehead. He looks down the hallway he just finished cleaning and lets out a satisfied sigh, calling it a huge accomplishment. He glances out the window and notices it's already pitch black outside. He figures Ray and the others should be ready to come back by now. Just then, he hears a noise at the door. Thinking speak of the devil, he cheerfully calls out a welcome back. But he stops mid-sentence, letting out a surprised "oh" as he sees what's in front of him. The door has burst open and Theo immediately panics, shouting to ask if they're okay. Ray and Canon have completely collapsed onto the floor, looking absolutely wrecked and covered in dungeon filth. Ray groans that she's hungry. Canon, who is face planted on the floor, mumbles that she forgot to eat. She seems totally delirious, muttering about what she is and begging Theo to help her. Canon clings to Ray, her stomach growling loudly. It turns out Canon hadn't eaten for nearly 10 days, even though she claims she forgot. Ray looks innocent and confused, saying she already ate yesterday and doesn't see the problem. Theo realizes what's going on and points a finger at them, declaring that Ray has learned the joy of eating. He explains that it's not just about nutrition anymore, she's learned to experience meals for their actual taste. Ray considers this, admitting he might be right. Theo tells them they'll eat soon, but first it's bath time. Cut to the bathroom where Canon is soaking in the tub. She asks herself if his name was Theo, admitting that the guy is seriously amazing. She looks around the sparkling clean room, completely baffled by how he managed to fix such a disastrous bathroom. She feels incredibly relaxed and admits she never thought she'd take a proper bath again. She concludes that if housework had ranks, Theo would definitely be S-rank. Ray joins her in the bath. She tells Canon that Theo can do things she can't, which is why she respects him. Canon gets all dramatic and envious, yelling that she wants to meet a guy like that soon too. Ray calmly points out that Canon has already met him, it's Theo. Canon gives her a blank stare, asking who she's talking about before it clicks. Ray continues, explaining that Theo treats Canon exactly as she is without any bias, and because of that, she's sure Canon and Theo can become good friends. Canon stammers, blushing as she realizes what Ray is implying about her relationship with Theo. Ray smiles and admits she usually gets a bit jealous when Theo gets close to someone else, but since Canon is her friend, she says it's fine if it's her. Canon immediately snaps, calling Ray an idiot. She yells that friendship is exactly why she wouldn't do it, refusing to do something tasteless like stealing her friend's guy. Ray just simply says, I see. Canon stares at her, thinking that she really can't figure out what's going on in Ray's head. She reflects that Ray is the kind of woman you can never quite grasp, no matter how hard you try. Theo stands in the kitchen, thinking about what to cook for the day. He realizes he got so zoned out cleaning the mansion that he completely forgot to do any food prep. He knows Ray and Canon are starving right now, so he decides he needs to whip something up fast. He gets to work. He takes the leftover curry from yesterday and mixes it directly into the rice. He piles plenty of extra ingredients on top, covers the whole thing in a generous layer of cheese, and tosses it into the oven to bake. Canon walks in and is blown away by the smell, asking how he made something so fast. Theo explains it's mostly just leftovers. Canon then notices that her clothes are somehow sparkling clean too, and she tells him he's incredible. Ray chimes in, agreeing that Theo is indeed amazing. Theo laughs it off, saying he just used the washing machine and suggests they finally eat. The table is set with a feast. Canon looks at the dish in front of her and asks what it is. Theo tells her it's a Doria gratin made with the leftover curry. Canon doesn't waste a second and says she's digging in. She takes one bite and her eyes light up. She raves about how the spices and the sweetness of the cheese match perfectly. Then she notices the meat and freezes. She's never tasted anything this good. Ray casually mentions that it's dragon meat. Canon goes into shock, repeating the word dragon. Suddenly, she gets a fire in her eyes and declares she needs to go hunt a dragon immediately because it's so tasty. Theo sweats, noting that this wild behavior is exactly why he told her not to go hunting earlier. Theo smiles and tells her that if she likes the food that much, she can come by any time. He'll always make enough for her. He adds that cooking for 3 isn't much harder than cooking for 2. He tells her that seeing her eat with such gusto makes him happy. While Ray gives her silent approval in the background, Canon blushes and suddenly changes the script. She asks Theo if he'd like to come over to her place instead. Back in the kitchen, things are getting messy. Theo tries to explain that he has actual work to do at the mansion, but Canon keeps pushing. She suggests that if it's just housework, he could simply commute from their place instead. She gets carried away and starts to call him her boyfriend, but gets cut off mid-sentence. Ray violently slaps her hand onto Canon's shoulder, smiling darkly while claiming there was a bug. While Ray laughs menacingly in the background, Canon loudly announces that since the meal is over, it's time for the third wheel to leave. Theo awkwardly offers to walk her to the door. Outside, Canon waves goodbye, but as she runs off, her smile fades. She thinks about how calm Ray is acting and realizes the Silver Princess is actually totally serious about Theo. Canon admits to herself that she's feeling a little jealous. The scene shifts to a bar where Alvin is absolutely hammered. He slams his beer mug down and starts screaming about that guy, demanding to know what Ray sees in him. His friends try to calm him down, wondering where Ray even found a man like that given her constant questing schedule. One of them brings up the dragon subjugation from the other day as the likely meeting place. The gossip continues as the men discuss rumors about a former knight who fled his post but is strangely good at cooking. They laugh about how he managed to win over even the great Ray's stomach. Canon, now geared up in her armor, happens to be nearby and overhears them. She connects the dots about the knight who cooks and realizes they are talking about Theo. She steps in and asks them to share the details, internally worrying about what Ferris will do if she catches wind of these rumors. The men look up, startled to be addressed by her. Later, the scene jumps to a clothing store. Ray is holding various outfits up against Theo, checking how they look on him. Theo stands there passively, watching her. It dawns on him that a man and a woman out shopping for clothes together usually means one thing. He starts to piece it together in his head. It clicks for him this is a date. While Ray hums happily next to him, Theo freaks out internally. Ray tells him that since these are his clothes, he needs to participate and choose properly. Theo apologizes, but his mind is still racing, wondering how exactly things turned out this way. Just then, a voice cuts through his thoughts, shouting and asking what is wrong with him. Theo checks out his sleeve and realizes his clothes are literally falling apart. He wonders if he ripped it while cleaning earlier and figures he needs a new outfit. But then his frugal side kicks in and he thinks he can just sew it up to make it last longer. Ray, however, is staring at him with a dark realization. She thinks she hasn't been paying him enough. She suddenly snaps, screaming that she wants to buy him clothes immediately, chanting buy. Buy, while Theo tries to panic wave her down. Cutting to outside, Theo steps out wearing a ridiculous disguise with sunglasses and a face mask. Ray looks at him flatly and points out that technically, she's also someone who shouldn't be found by the knights, so his solo disguise is pointless. Theo ignores her logic, posing dramatically while claiming that with this look, no one will know who he is. Ray sighs, telling him she liked how he looked before better. She adds that if the knights do find them, she doesn't need that kind of trouble, implying she'll just handle it if it comes to that. So she tells him she'll fix the situation. They leave the shop, and Theo narrates that despite all the fuss, He ended up getting clothes made that feel basically identical to his old one. As they walk, Theo comments that it feels like the fantasy setting is breaking a bit with these modernish clothes, and Ray agrees. Just then, a cheerful woman wearing a headscarf spots them and calls out, shouting what a coincidence it is to run into them. Theo recognizes her as Aunt Lean. The woman tells Ray it's perfect timing because she was just about to bring her something. Ray accepts a paper bag and thanks her. It turns out to be a massive bag of fresh strawberries. Aunt Lean boasts that they are fresh-picked and super delicious, explaining that she owes Ray a lot, so this is the least she can do. Theo, realizing he doesn't know this lady, steps forward to politely introduce himself as Ray's employee. Aunt Lean immediately interrupts him, assuming he must be the husband of the rumored Ray. She gushes over them, telling them to eat the strawberries together and get along, calling them cute and innocent for blushing. Theo frantically waves his hands, shouting that's absolutely not it, realizing this lady doesn't listen to a single word people say. He suddenly pictures the muscular vegetable shopkeeper from before and realizes this is Uncle Bartle's wife. It makes perfect sense. Aunt Lean continues her story, explaining that when her husband got sick long ago, Ray brought him a phoenix feather to save him, and they've been grateful ever since. Theo's brain short-circuits. He asks if a phoenix isn't an S-rank monster. He looks at Ray in disbelief, screaming internally that she traded a legendary S-rank item for a reward of fruit. He calls her totally crazy, but Ray just smiles warmly, saying Bartle always gives her fruit as thanks and that makes her happy. Before Theo can process this terrible trade value, a voice interrupts them, starting with a polite "Good day, Ray," before immediately turning cold and snapping "Know your place" at Theo. It's Alvin, the armored guy from the bar, standing there with his squad. Alvin approaches the pair and asks Ray if she took some of her family members shopping. Ray corrects him, explaining that she was out hunting the Evolve series monsters earlier, and this shopping trip is just a victory celebration. Alvin nods, noting that the Evolve ogre is an A-rank threat and a tough enemy, though he immediately slips in a brag that it would have been an easy task for him personally. He explains to Theo that the Evolve series are vicious, mutated versions of regular monsters, and compliments Ray on taking one down without breaking a sweat. Then, Alvin turns his attention fully to Theo. He tells him good work, but then casually adds that he assumes they were out on a date. Alvin freezes as he processes his own words. He tries to recover, stuttering that it's good to hear, but reminds them they have an early hunt tomorrow so they shouldn't relax too much. Ray suddenly drops the news that she might be away for a while. Theo is shocked to hear she won't be there starting tomorrow, and Alvin demands to know how long she'll be gone. Ray completely ignores Alvin's question, focusing instead on whether there will be breakfast tomorrow because she wants to eat before she flies back to boost morale. Theo mentions that one night's sleep is plenty for him, but Ray decides to tease him. She asks if he'll miss her and then loudly asks if he wants to sleep together again tonight. Alvin looks like his soul just left his body. Alvin snaps completely. He screams at Theo, demanding to know how he dares to deceive Lady Ray. He draws his blade, yelling that he can no longer forgive him, and tells Theo to become rust on his sword. Theo sprints away in a panic, wondering how the conversation escalated to murder so quickly. Ray steps in to clarify the situation, stating calmly that Theo is properly working. Theo frantically agrees from a safe distance, stammering that he isn't just messing around. Theo yells out that he is doing housework. Alvin stops, looking completely confused as he tries to process the word. Theo clarifies that when he says work, he doesn't mean being a sailor, a blacksmith, or a mage. He literally means household chores. Alvin goes into denial, refusing to believe it, but then the reality hits him. He bursts into tears, realizing Theo was at Ray's house making it beautiful. He begs Ray, insisting that he can do cleaning, cooking, and laundry too, and pleads with her to rely on him instead. The commotion draws the attention of the townspeople, who start gossiping. A wave of murmurs spreads through the crowd as they question if Ray's garbage mansion is actually clean. People share horror stories about the cursed, filthy mansion, with one guy claiming he once saw something moving in the trash heap. They debate how many people it would take to clean such a disaster zone and are in disbelief when they hear it was just one person. One local even jokes that not even a god could clean that sea of decay alone. In the foreground, Ray listens to everyone openly trashing how dirty her home used to be, looking incredibly sulky and offended. Ray admits that the townspeople's honest comments actually hurt a bit. Theo tries to comfort her with a nervous smile, pointing out that at least it's clean now, provided she doesn't make a mess again. Ray agrees, but the peace is short-lived. Alvin suddenly points an accusatory finger at Theo. He calls Theo a random nobody and challenges him to a housekeeping duel. Theo looks baffled, but Alvin is dead serious, declaring that once he defeats Theo in domestic skills, he will take over the role of protecting Ray's home. Theo screams in despair, wondering how his life turned into this, while a twintle girl in the background watches the scene unfold in shock. Theo tries to calm the situation down, noticing that Alvin is way too worked up to listen to reason. But Alvin ignores the plea, shouting that he accepts the challenge. He declares this duel to be the true spirit of manhood. With flames in his eyes, he yells at Ray to witness this, proclaiming that once he wins the match, he's going to take Theo's place by her side. Theo immediately shuts that idea down, stating flatly that it's impossible. Alvin collapses to the ground in agony, letting out a soul-crushing scream. He slams his fists on the floor, wailing about how unfair it is. He cries out that as family, he has spent so much more time with Ray, yet he still can't become her right-hand man. He stares blankly at the ground, wondering aloud what exactly he is lacking compared to Theo. Theo suggests that if Alvin wants answers, he should just come to Ray's house and see for himself. Alvin looks confused but tells Theo to lead the way. Theo quickly checks with Ray if it's okay to bring a guest, and she gives a casual approval. They arrive at the mansion shortly after. As soon as Alvin steps through the door, he freezes in the entrance, stammering as he tries to process the sight before him. Alvin loses his mind looking at the sparkling interior. He shouts in disbelief that the place has been transformed into an actual livable space. He turns to Theo, demanding to know what kind of ancient sorcery from the Age of Myths he used to pull this off. Theo simply replies that he just cleaned it, nothing more. Alvin refuses to accept that answer, screaming that it's nonsense. He explains that the nation sent elite janitors to clean this mansion, but the operation was aborted because they all got struck by a mysterious illness. He can't believe Theo resolved a national failure single-handedly without any special techniques. Ray picks up on the strange illness comment and turns to Theo, realizing he kept quiet about the danger the whole time. She stares at him with a sharp look, knowing he hid the truth. Theo sweats nervously and plays dumb, claiming he was just so focused on cleaning that he didn't hear anything about a curse. Alvin, still in denial, insists that maybe only the entrance hall is clean and refuses to admit defeat just yet. Theo calmly invites him to come take a look at the other rooms. Alvin walks through the house, completely stunned by what he sees. He notes that rooms which previously looked like they would spawn new breeds of monsters are now as clean as a high-end hotel. He stops in front of the bathroom, trembling as he realizes the bathroom of tragedy is actually usable again. Theo mentions that everyone usually says the same thing. Alvin looks like he's about to crumble, struggling to find any reason to keep arguing. Theo offers to make some food, smiling as he suggests they have something to eat. He notes internally that even though he made the offer, he knows Alvin actually already ate dinner with his family, and Ray also had a meal right before leaving the house. Despite them having eaten, Theo decides to cook anyway. He gets to work in the pristine kitchen, washing fresh strawberries, chopping them with precision, and whipping up cream. He flips fluffy pancakes in the pan, assembling a proper dessert. Theo places the finished product on the table, presenting them with strawberry pancakes and inviting them to enjoy. The dessert looks professionally made, stacked high with fruit and flowers. Alvin stares at the plate, scoffing to himself that sweet things are only meant for women and children. Alvin takes one bite and completely loses his mind. He starts shouting about the perfectly balanced strawberry tartness, bringing out the depth of the sauce. He raves that the whipped cream melts away like a cloud, and screams that the sweetness leaves a refreshing aftertaste on his tongue. Ray comments that everyone gets talkative when they eat Theo's cooking, and Theo laughs, appreciating the compliment. Alvin declares that he has never tasted such an elegant dessert at any banquet in any country. Meanwhile, Ray looks down at her plate in shock, realizing her pancake is already gone and regretting that she didn't savor it more carefully. Theo reveals he anticipated Ray would run out instantly, so he brings out a massive, tower-sized pancake stack he made in advance. Ray cheers that she is so happy. As she happily munches away, Alvin watches her smile, then looks at his own clean plate and slams it down on the table with a serious expression. Alvin thanks Theo for the meal and announces that he will be taking his leave now. But before he goes, he tells Theo to come with him for a bit. Theo follows Alvin out of the room, leaving Ray behind to enjoy her dessert as she watches them walk away. Alvin stands outside the mansion with Theo finally admitting defeat. He thinks back to Ray's smiling face and tells Theo that in all his years of serving her, he's never seen her show such genuine trust before. It frustrates him, but he accepts he's lost this round. He starts to say he can't be the one to support Ray, but Theo interrupts, admitting he feels the exact same frustration. Theo explains that while Alvin and the others can fight by her side, he can't keep up with her on the battlefield. All he can do is wait alone at home for her safe return, but he tells Alvin he's actually fine with that. Theo continues, explaining that when Ray comes home, his only goal is to make her smile and bring her even a little bit of happiness. He says that's enough for him. He flashes back to the moment Ray saved him, telling Alvin that since she saved his life, being her support at home is the only way he can repay her. Alvin listens to this and completely crumbles. He realizes he's lost not just as a person, but as a man. It's a total defeat. He thinks back on his time with Ray, realizing that while he fought alongside her as family, he had put her on a pedestal, fearing and admiring her too much to imagine being happy with her casually. He screams out in agony, realizing he was the one who built the wall between them the whole time. Theo just stands there awkwardly watching Alvin have a mental breakdown, unsure of what to do. After Alvin pulls himself together, Theo invites him to come back again, telling him to come hungry next time so they can all eat around the table until they're full. Alvin turns away, trying to maintain his tough guy image. He tells Theo not to get cocky and that even though he lost this time, Theo hasn't fully earned his trust yet. But then he stammers, admitting that the cooking was so good it makes him want to eat it again. He finally addresses the chef by his name, Theo, and Theo smiles, saying it's an honor. Later, Alvin stands on a cliff yelling at the sunset, vowing to hone his own household skills to compete. Meanwhile, darker events are unfolding elsewhere. The narrator notes that monster attacks are increasing and becoming more ferocious. Back near the mansion, a mysterious woman with short light hair watches from the shadows, suggesting Theo might be out of one trouble but heading straight into another involving grudges from the past. Oblivious to the looming threat, Theo is busy in the garden with a smoker. The narrator ominously notes that a delicious aroma can sometimes attract danger. Theo checks on his hanging smoked meats, looking pleased with the results as he says, "All right," to himself. Theo wipes the sweat from his brow, looking satisfied with his work on the smoked meat. He thinks back to a conversation with Ray, remembering how she admitted she missed mealtime this time around. She had told him that if he provides her with smoked meat, she can eat while she's out on the hunt, adding that without his care, she usually ends up not eating at all. Responding to the memory, Theo heads back toward the building. He says, "Okay," to himself, still thinking about the food, when he notices a figure standing near the building. He politely asks if he can help with something as he turns around. But when he fully faces the visitor, he freezes. It's the short-haired woman in armor from his past. They lock eyes and Theo lets out a shocked gasp as he recognizes her. The woman is absolutely furious. She confirms that he really is alive and screams his name, Theo. She recites the official report she was given. That during the dragon subjugation, Theo used his entire squad as decoys to save himself and was burned to death by the flames. She looks at him with pure hatred, disgusted that he would go so far as to fake his own death. Theo is stunned hearing this fabrication, stammering that there's no way that's true. Theo instantly realizes this is Captain Bram's doing. He thinks to himself that Bram obviously wouldn't give anyone accurate information about him, but this lie is outrageous. The woman continues, explaining that she heard some shady rumors in town and came to investigate, and she's glad she did. She glares at him, saying she never thought he'd try to get close to someone like Ray Silverhorn. Theo tries to deny it, stammering, but she screams silence before he can get a word out. She refuses to hear him out, calling his words drivel from a sex offender and declaring she won't listen. Theo desperately tries to explain that the whole story is a misunderstanding and starts to say that Bram is the one responsible. But she talks right over him, claiming that anytime he opens his mouth, it's just excuses, exactly like it always was. Theo looks at her with a pained expression and says her name, Felis, but this only makes her recoil. She screams that he's disgusting. Felis turns her back on him, stating she has nothing more to say. She informs him that since his case was originally under Captain Bram's jurisdiction, Bram will be the one to take the appropriate measures now that Theo has been found. She walks away, leaving Theo standing alone in the yard, completely stunned by the encounter. The scene fades out on the quiet sky above. Alvin snaps Theo out of his daze, asking what's wrong. He reminds Theo that he already said they were just scouting today and plan to go out properly at night. Theo, still reeling from the encounter with Felis, looks confused and stammers an apology, barely recognizing Canon and Alvin at first. Canon sighs, asking if he seriously forgot, then immediately complains that she's hungry and wants to know if there's food. Theo jumps up from his chair in a panic, shouting that he'll get it ready right now. The others watch him scramble, wondering what's up with him. Moments later, he slams a large bowl onto the table. Alvin and Canon look at the dish, confirming it's stir-fried vegetables. The group starts eating. Theo apologizes for the simple meal since he was short on time, but they love it. Canon praises the crisp veggies and juicy meat, noting that even though it's a little burnt, she has no complaints. Alvin agrees, saying it's the ideal side dish for rice and that he wants the others to try it too. He admits he couldn't taste much before, so having food this good is great. Theo thanks them, looking relieved. Ray suddenly speaks up, cutting through the praise. She asks Theo directly if something happened. Theo freezes and tries to play dumb, but Ray points out that the taste is different from usual. Theo tries to blame the burnt parts, but Ray shuts him down, telling him that he was distracted and needs to be more careful next time. She states plainly that the off taste isn't just because of the burning. An awkward silence falls over the table as Alvin and Canon watch the exchange. Theo nervously admits that he just ran into an old acquaintance. Alvin seems surprised that Theo actually knows people, but then scolds Canon when she starts prying. Canon ignores him, zeroing in on Theo with a sly grin. She declares it must have been a woman, specifically an old girlfriend. Theo frantically denies it, but Canon laughs, pointing out that his panic makes him look super suspicious. Theo tries to claim he was just feeling nostalgic, but Canon waves him off, saying she's just kidding. Theo turns to Ray and apologizes for worrying her, insisting that he's fine. Ray accepts this with a simple nod, saying she gets it. Theo promises to do better next time. Later, standing alone outside under the moonlight, Theo tries to convince himself that everything is okay. He thinks that even Captain Bram wouldn't be bored enough to come all this way just to chase after him. Later that night, the mansion is quiet. Everyone else has drifted off to sleep, but in one room, Theo is sitting on the edge of his bed, wide awake. He's staring at the floor, lost in thought, when suddenly the door handle clicks and the door opens. Ray walks into the room. Theo turns, surprised to see her up this late, and stammers out a confused question as to why she's there. Ray looks at him calmly and asks if he can't sleep. Theo quickly tries to cover, rubbing his neck and claiming he's just feeling a bit drowsy because he spent the whole day spacing out. Ray ignores the excuse and hands him a small object. Theo holds it up, realizing it's a teleportation magic stone, and asks what this is all about. Sitting on the bed next to him, Ray explains that if anything happens, he just needs to think of her and crush the stone. She promises that if he does, she'll fly to him instantly, no matter where he is. Her expression softens, and she tells him that while she doesn't know what happened with his old acquaintance, he shouldn't forget that she is always on his side. Without another word, Ray leans in and hugs him. Theo accepts the comfort, closing his eyes and thanking her. In his head, he admits defeat. He knew it all along. He really is no match for her intuition. Ray leaves the room, and Theo finally settles back into bed. He stares at the magic stone for a moment before tucking it away and drifting off to sleep under the moonlight. But the peace doesn't last long. A loud crashing sound echoes through the mansion, jolting Theo awake in a panic. Chaos erupts as Captain Bram storms into the mansion. He yells that they received a report about the building harboring a fugitive and declares they are searching the place right now. He orders his squad to smash everything if they have to, shouting that they don't know where the fugitive is hiding. Theo recognizes that voice instantly. He rushes out, horrified, and confronts Bram, demanding to know what he's doing there. Captain Bram is absolutely manic, screaming that he's been dying to see Theo. He demands to know how the hell Theo made it out of that situation alive, though he admits Theo's luck isn't too bad. Mocking him, Bram calls Theo a genius and refers to him as his precious toy that finally came back home. Bram laughs, declaring that he's actually the luckiest one of all. Theo is confused and groggy, but Bram doesn't give him a break. The captain offers him a twisted choice: either get beaten to a pulp and then arrested, or get arrested and then beaten to a pulp. While Bram talks, Theo remembers the item Ray gave him and her specific instruction to think of her and crush it if he needed help. Realizing he has an ace up his sleeve, Theo raises the stone and tells Bram he talks a lot of shit. Bram immediately gets physical, grabbing Theo and asking if this is his rebellious phase, sarcastically claiming to be heartbroken. He notices Theo's clenched fist and demands to see what he's holding. When Theo refuses to open his hand, Bram forcefully squeezes Theo's fingers, telling him not to be so cold and keep secrets from them. During the struggle, the stone slips from Theo's grip and clatters onto the floor. Bram holds Theo back and looks down at the object, instantly recognizing it as a teleportation stone. He scoffs, complaining about how high-ranking adventurers live such good lives with items like that, muttering that it really pisses him off. Bram stomps his boot down hard, crushing the stone into dust while asking what Theo was hoping to achieve. He taunts Theo, asking if he even knew how the item worked, explaining that the person breaking the stone needs to visualize the person they're calling. Since Bram is the one who broke it, he grins and tells Theo it's too bad, but his guardian angel isn't coming to save him. With the hope of rescue gone, Bram officially declares the suspect in custody. One of his soldiers lists off the bogus charges: desertion in the face of the enemy, treason, and the false attempted rape charge from 4 years ago. Bram leans in close, taunting Theo about his crimes piling up and suggesting he might pull some strings to keep Theo alive as a slave again. Just then, a soldier interrupts to remind the captain that it's time for that, and Bram snaps out of it, realizing he almost forgot he has important business to attend to. Bram pulls a small bag of white powder from his pocket and plants it inside a drawer. He immediately starts putting on a show, screaming about finding drugs in the house. He gloats that the headlines will scream about an S-rank adventurer throwing a drug party, calling it huge news. Theo stammers that this is ridiculous since he just saw them plant it, but Bram keeps yelling that this is a grave situation. Bram laughs maniacally, telling Theo he's as much of an idiot as ever. He declares that this setup will teach those adventure pieces of garbage to stay in line, calling it Ray's punishment for getting carried away. He mocks Theo, asking who on earth would testify in their favor. Theo spirals into self-blame, thinking that Ray was stupid to pick up a jinx like him, and realizing that everyone is suffering just because he's involved. Desperate to save his friends, Theo drops to his knees and presses his forehead to the ground. He tells Captain Bram he was wrong and begs him to just leave Ray out of this. Bram completely ignores the apology. He turns to his soldiers and announces it's time for the finishing touches, ordering them to ravage everything in sight. Theo looks up in horror, screaming at them to stop and offering himself up instead. Bram grabs a handful of Theo's hair and yanks his head back violently. He asks Theo if he's misunderstanding the situation. Bram sneers that a worthless scrap like Theo isn't worth all this effort on his own. He reveals that this is actually his chance to crush the adventurers he never liked, and he laughs loudly, making it clear he has no intention of letting anyone get away. Meanwhile, at a different location, a massive dragon collapses to the ground dead. Ray stands next to the fallen beast looking calm. The crowd of onlookers cheers wildly at the victory. Canon throws her hands up and yells out that she did it, celebrating the win. Alvin turns to Ray and tells her she did it, giving credit where it's due. Ray quietly says okay, but her attention suddenly shifts elsewhere. Without warning, she launches herself into the sky with explosive speed. Canon and Alvin are left standing there in total shock as Ray vanishes into the distance. Back at the dragon's site, Ray suddenly launches herself into the air, shouting that she's leaving the cleanup to the rest of the team. Canon chases after her, yelling for her to wait a minute. Confused, Canon asks what's going on, while Alvin wonders if Ray had some kind of premonition. As she rushes off, Ray realizes the truth. The teleportation stone she gave Theo shattered without ever being used. She knows this signals immediate danger and she races to get to him. Meanwhile, Theo is locked in a cell, enduring a barrage of abuse from Bram's squad. Soldiers dump buckets of filth into his cell while screaming at him through the bars. They ask how he dares to come back after using his comrades as decoys and demand to know why he didn't have the decency to kill himself. They continue to berate him, calling him a traitor and a disgrace to the knighthood as he sits there silently. Captain Bram struts into the dungeon area and casually greets Theo. Seeing the mess the soldiers have made, Bram smirks and notes that Theo seems to be the favorite. He unlocks the cell and orders Theo to follow him. As Theo is led away, the soldiers snicker in the background, whispering excitedly about whether this means Theo is finally finished. As Theo walks down the corridor, a bucket comes flying and smacks him right in the head. The soldiers burst into laughter, mocking him by asking if his final drink is delicious and joking that it's a luxury for a traitor. Bram watches the spectacle and sneers, telling Theo he's quite the celebrity. Felis stands nearby and adds that she's honored to see this. Bram then turns his attention back to Theo to continue his torment. Suddenly, Bram kicks Theo's legs out from under him. Theo hits the ground with a grunt of pain. Bram looms over him, mockingly asking why he's sleeping and screaming at him to get the hell up. With a crazed look in his eyes, Bram announces that it is finally time for judgment. In the forest, Ray's party is sprinting to catch up. Canon complains that she can't believe this is happening. Alvin explains that Ray set up a secondary magic stone to send an alert specifically if the teleportation stone failed, noting how absurdly overprotective that is. Canon admits it came in handy though. Ahead of them, Ray runs with total focus, her only thought on whether Theo is okay. Ray and her team arrive at their destination, likely the mansion where Theo was staying, only to find the place completely trashed. Books and furniture are scattered everywhere. Ray scans the room and states that she can't feel Theo's presence at all. Canon looks around at the wreckage and asks what on earth happened here. From the shadows, a voice mocks them, saying it took them long enough to arrive. Two knights step forward with smug grins, welcoming the adventurer and noting they've been waiting for this. Canon immediately recognizes their armor and yells out in shock, asking why the knights are there. Ray doesn't care about their rank. She gets right in their faces and demands to know where Theo is. One of the knights puts a hand up to shove them back, warning them not to dare touch him. As Canon tries to ask what they're doing, the knight yells at her to shut up and calls Ray a criminal. The knights then drop the bomb. They claim a massive stash of narcotics was discovered in Ray's home, and they are taking her into custody right now. Canon is baffled, yelling that there's no way Ray would ever use drugs. Alvin tries to handle this diplomatically, suggesting there must be a mistake and asking them to double-check the facts. The knight instantly cuts him off, telling him to shut the hell up. He starts mocking them, saying he's sick of hearing excuses from Theo's friends. He even sneers and asks if Alvin and Canon are high too. His partner warns them not to get cocky and tells Ray Silver to just shut up and surrender. Ray has heard enough. She casually swings her arm through the empty air. The knights and her own teammates watch in shock as the invisible force of her swing completely obliterates the stone wall right next to the knight's head. As the debris settles, Ray looks at the terrified soldier and calls him worthless. Ray leans in close, her face twisted in fury, and screams that she is asking for Theo's location right now. The other knight, trembling, warns her to wait, pointing out that attacking them means making an enemy of the entire order of knights. Canon tries to step in to de-escalate the situation, but the knight on the ground has already broken. He screams in pure terror, promising to tell her everything if she just spares his life. After extracting the information, Ray announces she knows where Theo is. Canon panics, realizing Ray is about to bolt, and asks if she plans to go alone. Ray simply states she's going. Alvin steps directly in her path, blocking the way and begging her to please listen to reason for a second. Ray fixes him with a terrifying glare and orders him to move. Alvin steps up with intense determination, shouting that he's joining the rescue mission. Ray looks at him in total confusion, but Alvin doubles down, claiming he owes that man for his hospitality. Canon jumps in right after, stating that obviously she's going too. She shoots a smile at Ray, reminding the S-rank adventurer that she isn't the only one who cares about Theo. Ray stares at her two companions. Canon asks if she's okay with this, pointing out that this is exactly what a family is supposed to be for. A smile crosses Ray's face. She drops a simple nope to dismiss any hesitation and immediately says, "Let's go." With the team united, Canon declares it's settled. The three of them are going to save him. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Theo. A rope binding him is sliced apart, and a sword is tossed into the ground right in front of him. Theo sits there, looking terrified and confused. Standing over him, Captain Bram grins with a twisted expression, bragging about how merciful he is. He tells Theo this is his last chance. Bram throws his arms wide and loudly announces the start of a trial by combat. The spectators, likely Bram's soldiers, instantly start chanting for blood, screaming at Theo to die and calling for a duel. Bram smirks at the chaos he's orchestrating, looking back at Theo and encouraging the violence, saying this is exactly how it should be. Bram calls out to Ferris, who is standing nearby. She looks completely indifferent, telling the captain she already told him to do as he pleases and that there was no need to call her over for this. As Theo stares at her in shock, Bram leans in close to his ear, mocking the situation. He comments on how Ferris is always like this and asks Theo if it doesn't feel lonely. Bram continues his psychological torture, saying it's very important that the three of them, him, Theo, and Ferris, are all here together for this. He grins maniacally, calling it the climax that they all need to see. He forces Theo into an impossible corner, telling him to make his choice, pick up the sword and fight or simply stay there and be killed. Theo snaps, his expression shifting from fear to fierce determination. He grips the sword and tells Bram not to screw with him. He shouts that he isn't letting himself get killed, declaring that he'll fight and he'll win. He screams that he won't be Bram's puppet forever and calls out the captain's name, swearing that he's going to make it back alive so he can return to Ray's side. Bram watches this sudden burst of defiance with a bored look, asking what's up with him and complaining that getting all fired up like that is such a turnoff. In the background, Ferris simply replies that she wouldn't know. Bram decides he's had enough, his face twisting into a dark scowl as he says he's always hated that whole hot-blooded attitude, and he charges in to attack. Their blades clash violently, sparks flying between them. Bram grunts with effort, complaining that this is so damn annoying coming from a mere Theo. He screams at Theo to just hurry up and die, repeating it over and over. Theo struggles to hold his ground against the captain's strength, gritting his teeth and insisting that he won't lose. Bram swings his sword down hard, muttering for Theo to die. But in the clash, a sword goes flying into the air. Seeing a massive opening, Theo lunges forward, shouting that he's got him. Bram looks genuinely surprised for a split second. Suddenly, Theo is blasted backward with tremendous force, smashing violently into the brick wall behind him. Bram stands there unharmed, wiping sweat from his brow. He admits that was way too close and claims he almost accidentally died back there. As Theo slumps against the wall, confused and asking why, Bram apologizes sarcastically for getting his hopes up. He mocks Theo, telling him that he never stood a chance from the start. Bram reveals the trick, a magical chain glowing across Theo's chest that Bram is controlling. He points out the chain he secretly wound around Theo, bragging that it's a good thing he kept this ace up his sleeve. He mocks Theo with a compliment, noting that he always had such good instincts and that talent clearly never rots. But then his expression darkens completely. He says this is pissing him off. Focusing on Theo's defiant glare, Bram says what's most annoying of all are those eyes. It's really pissing him off. Bram is completely losing it, raining blows down on Theo. He screams about how much he hates those defiant eyes and the light that's still shining in the back of them. He yells at Theo not to dare find joy in something like cooking, calling him a piece of shit. He shouts that Theo should have just despaired of the world and died already. Ferris watches the brutality, pleading for the captain to stop, but Bram ignores her, screaming over and over for Theo to just die right now. Ferris looks on in horror, realizing that at this rate, Theo is actually going to be killed. Bram leans in close to Ferris, whispering that she's going to kill them anyway, so there's no problem with this. Ferris asks why, clearly distressed. She stammers that as a knight this kind of conduct is wrong, but she can't seem to stand up to him. Bram mocks her openly, laughing at the idea of a knight. He asks if she's seriously getting worked up over chivalry in this day and age. Then he turns his attention back to Theo, casually remarking on how crazy it is that Ferris takes everything so seriously. Bram continues his explanation, mentioning that they say the more serious a person is, the easier they are to hypnotize, and in Ferris's case it turned out to be true. Theo, battered and bruised, picks up on that word suggestion. Bram reveals the truth. That night, he used a magical suggestion on Ferris to make her hallucinate that Theo was attacking her. He adds with a sleazy grin that since she's a beauty, it's true he wanted to sleep with her too. Theo, horrified, asks why he would do something so cruel. Bram acts confused for a second, then his face goes dark as he says there's only one reason. Bram explains that it's just a little something to kill time, pure entertainment. He starts ranting about the night's order, describing it as a constant buildup of stress where he has to live under bullshit constraints of chivalry while knowing he could die tomorrow. He claims that if he doesn't pick a target to blow off steam, he feels like he's suffocating. He looks down at Theo with a twisted smile and tells him that if he's going to bully someone, Theo is the perfect model student for it. Bram yanks hard on the glowing chain to choke the life out of Theo, but Theo grabs the metal links with his bare hands, refusing to buckle. He struggles against the magical force, stammering at first, but then finding his voice. He tells Bram he's not a toy. He declares his name is Theo. And then, with every ounce of spirit he has left, he screams that he is Ray's house husband. Suddenly, a voice complains that something was a real pain. The solid brick wall of the room explodes inward, debris flying everywhere. Canon steps through the massive hole she just made, looking totally unbothered. She apologizes casually, explaining that finding the entrance to this place was actually a huge hassle. Theo spots his allies through the dust and shouts Canon's name. Bram immediately goes into panic mode, screaming that they have intruders and ordering his frozen men to surround them. Canon steps through the wreckage, looking completely unimpressed, and tells the soldiers she actually feels sorry for them. Alvin steps up beside her and says he agrees with that. Ray Silverhorn makes her entrance, striding forward with such force that soldiers are sent flying through the air. She announces that their little princess is in a super bad mood today. The troops on the ground groan in pain, while the others start freaking out as they realize who she is. One soldier questions why an S-rank adventurer would be there, while Canon just watches with a smile as Ray arrives. Ray pulls Theo into a tight embrace, telling him softly that she's come for him. Theo, battered and exhausted, leans into her shoulder and simply thanks her. Meanwhile, inside the nearby castle, a figure at a desk hears the commotion outside and complains that everyone is being too noisy. Ray stands protective and close to Theo, reconfirming the bond they share is strong and right there in that moment. Ray and Theo settle near the castle wall while Bram completely loses his mind. He screams at his men to stop staring and surround the intruders so they can't escape. The soldiers shout back in agreement, rallying their courage. As they prepare to charge, Bram shrieks at them not to let the intruders leave the place alive. Ray cuts through the noise with a terrifying glare. She tells them cold that they are being way too loud. The sheer pressure of her aura hits them instantly. Bram lets out a pathetic squeak of terror, and the soldiers collapse to their knees, convinced they're about to die. Bram tries to yell at his men to pull themselves together, but he's shaking just as bad as they are. Captain Bram is screaming his head off, listing charges of trespassing, assault, and obstructing an officer. He yells asking if they think they can just walk away for free, but Theo and Ray are completely ignoring him. Theo turns to Ray and thanks her, and she gently assures him that he'll be home soon. Theo then notices something and asks Ray if she's okay, pointing out what looks like a terrible injury on her. Ray dismisses it, saying it's not as bad as it looks. In the background, Bram's face starts twitching uncontrollably as he realizes he's being totally disregarded. Bram finally snaps. He screams at the top of his lungs, demanding that they don't dare ignore him. The sheer volume startles Theo, while Ray just narrows her eyes. Ray casually swats Bram aside, launching him backward with such force that he crashes upside down into a pile of wooden crates. The soldiers stand frozen in stunned silence. Ray lowers her hand and comments that should keep things quiet for a little while. The soldiers start whispering in terror, calling her a monster for blowing their captain back that far with ease. Chaos breaks out among the troops until a female knight steps forward. She yells at everyone to calm down. She admits that Ray Silverhorn might be out of the question to fight, but she orders them to capture the other intruders instead. She shouts that letting them leave would be a disgrace to the knights and must not be allowed. The soldiers rally and agree, but Canon steps up. She addresses the female knight as Aqua, telling her she's got a lot of nerve saying that. Canon smiles and reminds them that technically she is an S-rank adventurer too. She unleashes a massive wave of fire magic, sending a terrifying blaze toward the soldiers. The soldiers recoil from the heat, instantly recognizing her as the flame demon Canon. Canon wonders aloud if she's really that easy to overlook just because she doesn't look like a typical mage. Alvin watches the display with a tired expression, while the desperate soldiers realize they can't beat her either. They frantically shout to target the man instead, meaning Alvin. Watching from the side, Theo gives a wry smile and notes that Canon is definitely the power type. Alvin steps into the fray, slicing through the enemy lines with precision. He introduces himself as an A-rank adventurer and coolly informs the soldiers that he won't be beaten by mere footmen like them. Captain Bram is completely losing his mind as his men struggle. He screams at the adventurers not to mess with them, refusing to let them treat this battlefield like a playground. Desperate to turn the tide, he bellows orders to his squad, demanding they kill all 4 intruders and show them the true guts of the knights. As the skirmish pauses, Canon and Alvin admit that the enemy soldiers actually have admirable guts for lasting this long. But Ray has her eyes locked on a specific target. She walks past Theo and addresses Bram directly, identifying him as the one who hurt Theo. She says that just shoving him away earlier wasn't nearly enough satisfaction. Drawing her sword, she glares at the captain and tells him that she will never forgive him. Ray swears this on her very soul with an intense stare. Bram, sweating but trying to maintain his bravado, mocks her for the cheesy line. He mutters to himself that despite everything, he's still going to win this in the end. With a crazed look in his eyes, Bram launches himself at Ray, screaming that bullying wouldn't be any fun if the victim didn't fight back. In a flash, Ray intercepts his attack. She calmly explains that she just cut his tendons to keep things quiet for a while. Bram hits the ground hard, realizing in panic that his legs won't work and he can't get up. His soldiers freak out, demanding to know what she did to their lord and shouting that she won't get away with it. Ray stands over the crippled Captain Bram, lecturing him. She explains that adventurers usually live by their own souls rather than common law. Bram is sweating and confused, asking what she's talking about all of a sudden. Ray tells him he just doesn't understand. Because they live by different rules, she would have absolutely no hesitation or guilt about cutting his head off right here and now. However, she acknowledges that Bram is a person who lives in the world of law. Because of that, she decides she's going to judge him by those laws instead of her own. Meanwhile, Canon is handling Bram's squad. She offers them a simple deal: come clean about what Bram did to Theo and she'll let them go. One soldier tries to act tough, scoffing that he'd never sell out his comrades. Canon isn't impressed. She grabs him by the collar and lights up a flame in her hand, asking if he wants to show her those guts of his. She threatens to roast him bit by bit as a special service. The soldier's bravado instantly vanishes, and he shrieks in terror. The intimidation works perfectly. The soldier spills everything, admitting that it's exactly what Canon suspects. He reveals that 4 years ago Theo wasn't the one who attacked Felis, it was Captain Bram. He explains that Bram set the entire thing up just to corner Theo. Other soldiers try to yell at him to shut up, but the man is broken. He tells them it doesn't matter anymore because Captain Bram is finished. Canon thanks him for the testimony. The remaining soldiers realize the opponent is just too powerful for them. Canon addresses the trembling group, asking if there is anyone else who wants to back up that testimony. She adds a menacing, by the way, to keep them on edge. Canon casually points out that the wall of fire surrounding them has been closing in for a while now. She asks if they've noticed that it's getting a little hot in there. With a simple snap of her fingers, the pressure breaks them. The soldiers realize they're beaten, dropping their spears and surrendering completely. With the squad broken, another soldier steps up to confirm the truth. He states clearly that Bram was the one who attacked Felis. Bram screams at them, calling them bastards, but the soldier keeps talking. He says he's been fed up with Bram's tyranny and violence for a long time. He exposes the full list of crimes. Bram ordered them to silence Theo, used Theo as a decoy against the dragon so he could run away, blamed the comrades' deaths on Theo, and then hogged all the credit. Bram curses as his reputation is destroyed, but suddenly voices ring out calling the name Felis, causing Bram to freeze in shock. Even after being defeated, Captain Bram is still screaming orders from the sidelines. He yells at Ferris, calling her a moron for just standing there. He aggressively reminds her that she's the captain and demands she do her damn job. As Bram screams at her to cut everyone down, Ferris stands there shaking, stammering incoherently as the pressure mounts. Ferris tries to snap out of it. She announces her full name as Ferris Ingrass. Steeling herself, she declares that as a knight and captain of the First Order, she has to fight. She screams out a war cry and charges forward, shouting that she's going to cut her opponent down. The fight is over in a split second. Aqua, the dark-haired knight, easily disarms Ferris and pins her to the ground, twisting her arm behind her back. With Ferris completely immobilized, Aqua looks down coldly and accuses her, realizing that Ferris is the one who cornered Theo back then. Aqua doesn't let up. She demands to know if Ferris actually realized the truth deep down. She asks how, in all those years watching Bram and Theo, Ferris never had a single doubt. Aqua accuses her of pretending not to see just to cover up the truth, saying she blamed everything on Theo simply because it was the easier option. Theo stands nearby, listening to this interrogation with a stunned look on his face. Ferris completely breaks down, Lying face first in the dirt, she sobs and tells Aqua to just go ahead and kill her. She keeps apologizing over and over again. The narration notes that while Ferris had tried to become an unthinking doll to survive, her heart is now bursting like a broken dam. Theo watches silently as she continues to cry and apologize. Seeing her like this, Theo starts to feel conflicted, wondering what he could have even done for her back then if he were in her position. But the moment is ruined when Captain Bram suddenly claws at the ground, scoffing that this is boring. Despite his injuries, Bram yells out furiously, telling them not to wrap things up so neatly because nobody wants to hear some cheap sob story. Alvin looks down at the scene and sighs, telling the group that Bram sure has a big mouth. Bram, despite being beaten on the ground, is still snarling threats. He glares up at Canon and threatens to rip her tongue right out of her mouth. Canon isn't fazed at all. She bends over and taunts him, daring him to go ahead and try it, though she jokingly adds she'd definitely be dead if he did. She scoffs at him, which just makes Bram angrier. He screams that they are all officially wanted men now. Canon just laughs and says in that case, she'll just have to kill the Knight Commander. Alvin watches her antics and sighs again, muttering that her mouth really never stops moving and expressing disbelief that a guy like Bram is actually a knight captain. Suddenly, a new voice cuts through the conversation from off-screen, agreeing with them. The voice notes that it really is a pain, but technically she is a captain of the knights too. Ray, Alvin, and Canon all freeze, sensing something instantly. Before they can react, a blur of motion slams into the group. Canon takes a massive hit and gets sent flying backward with a loud impact. Canon skids to a halt and calls out to Alvin, warning him that this attacker is seriously strong. Alvin grimly observes the newcomer, realizing they are dealing with the actual captain of the First Knight Order. The soldiers in the background start cheering wildly, recognizing their leader, Captain Yui. Yui stands there poised and elegant, smoothing her dress. She tells them she's flattered by the reception. Yui doesn't waste a second on pleasantries. She immediately dashes behind Ray and swings her sword in a lethal arc. Ray blocks the strike from behind without even turning around, the metal clashing loudly. Ray calmly remarks that it's pretty cruel of her to attack from behind like that. Yui just huffs a small laugh as they both leap back to create distance between them. Ray faces her opponent, lowering her sword slightly as she acknowledges that this is where Yui has been all along. Yui looks back with a calm smile, noting that as usual, Ray seems to have no interest in other people, which makes her quite sad. Her eyes sharpen as she mentions that she's always heard the rumors about Ray. The talk ends there. Yui and Ray lunge at each other, their swords locking together with a burst of sparks. They stare each other down intensely from across their blades, the S-rank adventurer and the knight captain now locked in a stalemate. Ray and Yui are locked in a high-speed duel, their weapons clashing violently. Yui thrusts her rapier with incredible precision, forcing Ray to stay purely on the defensive. The attacks come in a blur, and Ray barely manages to deflect the strikes as she gets pushed back. Alvin watches the exchange with sweat running down his face, noting in his head that Yui is seriously strong. Yui finally steps back to create distance, sighing that there is just no end to this fight. She lowers her weapon slightly and asks Ray how about they make a deal. Ray pauses, repeating the word, and Yui presses her for an answer, confirming she's serious. Yui points her blade directly at Ray and lays out her terms. Ray Silverhorn must quit being an adventurer right here and now. She promises that if Ray accepts, she won't question the other three and will let everyone go home peacefully. The group immediately protests, shouting about why Ray has to be the one to take responsibility. Yui just smiles coolly, remarking that it's only natural for the leader to take the fall. Alvin can only grit his teeth in frustration. Canon finally snaps. She screams at Yui not to screw with her, furious that she's had to sit there listening to Yui's nonsense. She yells that Yui is being completely one-sided since it was her subordinate who started the whole mess. Yui calmly admits that might have been the catalyst, but she claims she doesn't want to make a scene either. However, she glances over at the massive hole in the wall Canon created earlier. She says she's afraid she can't overlook that kind of damage, taunting them by wondering who on earth would do something so barbaric. Yui presses her advantage, asking what they intend to do now. She suggests that sacrificing a single adventurer's license is a small price to pay to resolve things. With Bram lying defeated on the floor nearby, she notes that someone needs to take responsibility for things escalating this far. She looks meaningfully at Theo, adding that this applies even if their actions were done to save someone precious to them. Ray makes her decision. She stares Yui down and asks for a swear. If she quits, Yui must promise never to lay a hand on Theo again. Yui smiles and agrees, stating that the man who was in the Knights is officially dead according to the order, implying the Theo standing there is just a civilian with the same name. Canon panics, screaming for Ray not to agree to the deal, but Ray just turns back to them with a smile, telling them to all get out of there together. Alvin shouts her name in desperation, but Ray closes her eyes and accepts the terms, saying simply, "All right." Ray pulls a massive U-turn immediately after agreeing to the deal. She looks Yui dead in the eye and apologizes, stating that quitting is actually impossible. The entire group, Alvin, Theo, and Canon, stands there with their mouths open, completely stunned by the whiplash. Yui is just as confused, sweating nervously as she stammers, asking if Rei actually understands the situation. Rei confirms she gets it, but she simply can't do what Yui is asking. Yui tries to make sense of this, asking how Rei intends to take responsibility for the mess if she won't quit. Rei bluntly replies that they just can't take responsibility. Yui asks if she's fine with being caught then, and Rei admits that would be a bit difficult. Canon jumps in, panicking about what happens to Theo, but Rei reminds her that Yui already confirmed he's being treated as dead. Yui is baffled by this logic, asking if Rei really intends to bear no costs and just head home like she's returning from a casual shopping trip. Rei smiles cheerfully and says nope. Seeing that she's getting nowhere, Yui lets out a heavy sigh. She admits defeat, saying she has no choice but to let it slide this time. She turns to Rei and remarks that she's always been stubborn like that, addressing her as Rei Wanasama. Theo is laughing nervously at the situation until his brain processes that last word. He freezes, shouting Wanasama, in total shock as he realizes they are sisters. Yui realizes she never actually introduced herself properly. She announces that she is Yui Silverhorn, Rei's biological sister. Theo finally understands why the Knight Captain is so ridiculously strong. It runs in the family. Yui tells Rei she should show her face at the family home once in a while since their father wishes to see her. But then her expression shifts from familial to serious as she prepares to deal with the real problem. In the next scene, Alvin notices something pathetic crawling on the floor. It's Bram. The corrupt captain screams at Yui, asking if she's really going to let this end without consequences, calling it a disgrace to the knights. Yui agrees with him, saying true enough. Bram thinks he's safe and excitedly demands she punish Rei's group. Yui turns a terrifying, shadowed glare toward him. She asks what exactly he's misunderstanding. She confirms there will be consequences, but she clarifies that she's talking about him. Bram's face goes blank with a confused huh. Yui towers over the terrified man, looking down at him with absolute contempt. She lectures him, saying he should have kept his shady schemes in the shadows and that this is what happens when he acts above his station. She lists off his failures, having his misdeeds exposed and allowing the fort to be raided, calling it a colossal blunder. She points out that his incompetence caused a disturbance big enough to force her, the commander, to come out personally. She asks if he thinks he's a big shot, then tells him he's about to learn the weight of the sin of wasting her time. Bram is pathetic, crawling on the ground and wailing for forgiveness. Yui isn't having any of it. She snaps at him, asking what kind of answer that is for a captain. She scolds him for having zero sense of responsibility and only caring about himself. Then, with a deadpan expression, she admits that she actually doesn't have any sense of responsibility either. She explains that she only took the job because her father ordered her to, so she really doesn't care about anything else. Theo watches this interaction, thinking that dealing with her must be tough and feeling a tiny bit of sympathy for the guy. Yui then turns her attention to Theo, saying she has a question for him. Yui asks Theo what he desires regarding Bram's punishment. Seeing an opening, Bram immediately starts groveling to Theo. He begs for forgiveness, admitting he was wrong. He tries to manipulate the situation, suggesting they just forget the whole thing happened and go home together like friends. Theo looks down at the desperate man, his expression cold. He tells Bram that he can never forgive him, no matter what. Bram's attitude does a complete 180 the second he gets rejected. He screams at Theo, calling him a bastard and warning him not to mock his kindness. Yui steps in, telling Bram to shut up as she dumps a bottle of liquid over his head. Bram panics, thrashing around and screaming that she's waterboarding him and he can't breathe. But then, he pauses as he realizes the liquid isn't hurting him. Bram realizes he's been fully healed. He celebrates, laughing that his injuries are gone. He turns to Yui with a big grin, claiming he knew she cared about her subordinates deep down. Yui immediately draws her sword and points it at him, calmly stating that if he takes one more step, she'll cut him down. Canon watches with pure disgust, telling Bram he truly is the lowest scum. Yui just ponders if killing him would be a problem. Yui drops the hammer, announcing that from now on, Bram will work as a criminal slave. She explains that's exactly why they healed him. They need him healthy so he can work. Bram's face goes blank as he processes the words. Theo smiles, telling him to work as hard as he can. Bram breaks down, screaming for mercy and begging for anything but that fate. Yui ignores him, stating the decision is final. Nearby, Rei asks Theo what a criminal slave is. Theo explains that it's a punishment for sins heavier than death. The explanation continues, describing a hellish existence where the prisoner is forced to labor under extreme conditions to atone for their crimes. The worst part is that even if they collapse or their mind breaks, they are forcibly healed just so they can keep working until the debt is paid. Yui cheerfully waves goodbye, telling him to do his best. Bram screams in terror as he's engulfed in magic and sent away to his punishment, finally bringing an end to the chaos he caused. Bram lets out one final, terrified scream as the magic engulfs him and drags him away to his punishment. Theo watches the man vanish with a cold, intense stare. In his mind, he knows that even if Bram died 3 times over, it wouldn't be enough to balance out the sins he committed. The group stands silent as the corrupt captain finally disappears. With the confrontation over, the adrenaline fades, leaving Theo looking exhausted and sweaty. Ray steps in, smiling gently as she tells him to look up. She reaches out her hand to him, inviting him to come back to their home. Theo takes the offer and they start walking. He thanks her, but Ray just playfully shuts him down with a nope, casually draping her arm around his neck like a bro. Behind them, someone lets out a long, heavy sigh at the display. Canon and Alvin are watching the pair walk off. Canon remarks that Theo and Ray are already flirting in their own little world, probably forgetting everyone else exists. Alvin agrees, calling it unrewarding. Hearing this, Theo frantically turns back, shouting that it's a huge misunderstanding and he's grateful to them too. Canon just waves him off dismissively. But as Theo turns back around, something on the ground catches his attention. It's Ferris. She's prostrated on the ground, slamming her head against the stone and screaming apologies over and over again. Canon looks at her with annoyance, calling the woman persistent, and Alvin offers to go give her a piece of his mind. Theo tells them to leave it alone. Canon calls him too soft, but Theo corrects her. He explains that it's not about being soft. He's walking away because there is literally nothing he can do for her. As they walk past the sobbing woman, Theo tells Ray that the concept of salvation is just crap in the end. He believes a person can only save themselves. The group exits through a massive hole in the wall, leaving the scene behind. Alone in the wreckage, Yui stands watching them go, quietly remarking that the whole situation was a total disaster. Back at the wall, Yui is standing with her second-in-command, Vice Captain Shilty. The guy is clearly stressed out, asking Yui if she's really okay just letting Theo's group walk away like that, warning that they could become a serious threat to the order later on. Yui just smiles and says she doesn't mind at all. Shilty sighs, deciding they'll cross that bridge when they come to it. Yui teases him for being so prickly and tells him to relax. She's in a good mood because, as she puts it, she met a truly fascinating individual today. Shilty looks at her like she's crazy, asking if by interesting she actually means Theo. He points out that Theo has somehow managed to get Lady Ray, Enma Canon, and their entire following wrapped around his finger. Shilty admits he's baffled. Yui only just met the guy, so he can't understand why she rates him so highly. Yui turns the question back on him, asking how Theo looks through his eyes. Shilty doesn't mince words. He bluntly states he has zero interest in Theo and doesn't see the appeal at all. He argues that even if Theo was framed, he's still a man who got taken down by a low-level guy like Bram, so he's not even worth evaluating. Yui smiles, telling Shilty he's completely missing the point. She explains that Theo's true power isn't about combat strength. It's that terrifying ability he has to draw people in. Yui's expression darkens for a second as she muses that even if Shilty were to fight him, the outcome might be unexpected. But then she stops herself, thinking about the timing of it all. A thought crosses her mind about the Demon King being sealed away for ages, a terrifying comparison she quickly laughs off. She crumbles a piece of debris in her hand, deciding it's just a coincidence. Later on, the scene shifts to a much less serious battlefield, the kitchen. Ray is trying to cook while Theo, whose arm is in a sling from his injuries, supervises. It's going poorly. One second the egg is sizzling and the next, a massive pillar of fire erupts from the pan. Ray panics, screaming for someone to put the fire out. Canon watches the disaster with dead eyes, asking how it's physically possible to make a fried egg explode. Ray pouts, admitting cooking is hard. Theo apologizes, saying it's his fault for getting injured and not being able to do it himself, while Ray mumbles that she thought she could handle it with his coaching. Canon just begs them to go buy takeout instead. As the chaotic day ends, the story begins to shift back into the past. Once upon a time, a long time ago, the story begins with a legend from long ago. It tells of a certain woman who possessed such immense magical power that even monsters came to adore her. Before long, she ruled over half the world and eventually came to be known as the Demon Lord. However, one day, those who would resist her rule finally appeared, revealing the shocking truth that this Demon Lord was actually a human. The war between humans and monsters dragged on for a very long time. But eventually, a single being was born among the humans who would change everything: the hero. Before the power of justice, the Demon King fell and was forced into a long, deep slumber of sealing within a massive crystal. Abruptly, a book snaps shut with a loud thud. A young noble girl with long twintails is sitting under a tree, and she lets out a heavy sigh, shouting about how absolutely boring the story is. The girl, Lady Turu, complains to her butler, Alba, that he doesn't need to read it out loud since she's memorized it so well she could recite it in her sleep. Alba tries to calm her down, but she dismisses the history as child's play, claiming only the battle between the hero and the Demon King matters. Alba nervously reminds her that the Hero Festival is starting soon, and it's a critical social gathering for foreign lords, so everyone is on edge. Turu brushes off his concerns, confident that their land, Astra's, is secure, and teases him that he'll get sealed away too if he worries so much. Alba internally frets that if she keeps acting this way, Queen Charles will be saddened. Turu suddenly decides that if he's going to be like that, they're going to Listoria. Alba panics, stammering that he still has to prepare for the others, but Turu cuts him off, saying she'll be fine as long as Alba is with her. She walks off, demanding he take her along, leaving Alba to chase after her in a panic. Meanwhile, back in the present day, Theo is staring at another culinary disaster. He admits he failed again while looking at a scorched black lump on a plate. Alvin, looking disgusted, tells Theo he should be the one to eat that mess himself. Later, the scene shifts to the mansion's dining area where Knight Commander Yui has paid a sudden visit. Theo nervously asks what brings her here so unexpectedly. After finishing a meal and a cup of tea, Yui politely thanks him, praising the tea and the food as truly delicious. Theo, a bit flustered by the visit, thanks her and assumes she's there for business. He tells her that if she's looking for Ray, she's out hunting right now. Yui shakes her head, clarifying that she didn't come for Ray today. Yui clarifies that she's here on business specifically with Master Theo, not Lady Ray. Theo looks confused, pointing to himself, but Yui confirms it, explaining there's a specific job request she wants him to take on. Theo asks if she means work. Yui mentions that the Hero Festival is coming up soon, and Theo asks what exactly they're supposed to do for it. He mentions that back in his days with the Knights, he only ever watched the festivities from a distance. He suddenly realizes he's bringing up his dark past and apologizes for dampening the mood, but Yui assures him it's fine. She reminds him that as a former knight, he knows the Hero's Festival isn't just a carnival. It's a celebration commemorating the time the hero brought light back to the world and ended the Demon King's reign of darkness. She explains that dignitaries from various nations will be gathering to conduct affairs of state, and as the host nation, they are expected to behave with more elegance than usual. Theo starts sweating, asking if that means she wants him to cook for them or act as a bodyguard. Yui drops the request. She wants him to serve as a certain person's exclusive escort. Theo is bewildered, but Yui explains the person is the Princess of Astoria, their neighbor. She admits the princess is incredibly selfish and difficult. She describes how her own knights were practically in tears begging to get out of the duty, and Theo realizes he's being set up. Yui confirms she wants to entrust the role to him. Theo immediately deadpans and tells her to leave. He starts panicking, yelling that he can't handle such a huge responsibility since he's just an ordinary guy. Yui insists he's being too modest. She points out that he's the only human the strongest adventurer, Ray Silverhorn, ever opened her heart to, and says she believes he has a special talent for opening people's hearts. Commander Yui lays out the terms of the offer. She points out that Theo can't keep using his injured arm forever and asks him what he thinks about the prospect of being stuck that way permanently. It's a clear ultimatum wrapped in a job offer. Back at the house, the group discusses the proposal. Ray immediately shuts it down, refusing to let Theo take the dangerous job. Theo starts to agree, preparing to turn it down, but Canon interrupts with enthusiasm. She argues that the reward, magical healing for Theo's arm, is a godsend, especially since potions are in short supply due to the monster outbreaks. Ray tries to scold her, but Canon points out that Theo can't even cook properly in his current state, so even if the job smells fishy, the payout is worth it. Ray cuts right through Canon's logic and accuses her of just wanting to eat a real meal again. Canon frantically tries to deny it but eventually cracks, admitting she's getting bored of convenience store snacks and wants a hearty dinner. Ray feels vindicated knowing Canon's true gluttonous motives, but Theo speaks up. He admits that Canon actually has a point. Living with one arm is proving harder than he expected. Canon immediately jumps on this, shouting that she told them so. Ray softens her expression and asks Theo directly what he wants to do, regardless of the others. Theo thinks about it for a moment. He considers that Commander Yui didn't seem like a bad person, and more importantly, he really wants to be able to cook good food for Ray and the team again. He tells Ray that he thinks he wants to take the job. Ray accepts his decision immediately, telling him that if he's decided, then that's what he should do. Later, they arrive at the grand hall where Yui is waiting. Yui welcomes Theo, looking pleasantly surprised that he arrived so soon to accept the position. Theo tries to speak up, but Yui notices the two people standing behind him. Her eyes widen as she realizes exactly who Theo has brought along as his entourage. Yui seems amused that two S-rank adventurers are acting as mere escort. She turns her gaze to the Silver Princess and says she's satisfied just by the fact that she came to visit, addressing her familiarly as Rei Wanasama. Rei coldly replies that she didn't exactly come here to see Yui. Yui teases her for being cold, but Ray cuts straight to business. She states that she has one condition regarding Theo's employment, leaving Yui looking surprised. Ray steps forward with her demands. She states clearly that she'll also be joining the mission as the princess's escort. She tells Yui that she can decide the specific details of the job, but Ray's participation is the non-negotiable condition for Theo accepting the offer. Yui calmly acknowledges the statement. Just then, Canon struts into the room, claiming she doesn't know what her cheeky little sister is plotting, but she figures she better tag along to keep an eye on things. She poses confidently and points out that getting two S-rank adventurers as bodyguards is a hell of a deal. She challenges Yui, asking if she's really going to brush off an offer like that. Yui's demeanor instantly flips. She claps her hands together with a bright smile, shouting that she understands and accepts those terms immediately. She beams, telling them she has absolutely no reason to refuse and actually feels much safer having them on the escort detail. Theo, standing on the sidelines, looks completely thrown off by her sudden shift in attitude, stammering to ask if she's really sure about this. Yui leans in close to a confused Theo, dropping her voice. She admits that this is actually a huge help to her, noting that she just managed to secure the strongest possible bodyguards. She whispers a reminder that she told him earlier she had a plan. She explains that everyone else who was considered for the princess's detail had been complaining about it, so this solves her problem perfectly. Yui continues to explain her reasoning with a dangerously pleasant smile. She says that if she had left this task to the regular knights and something went wrong, it would only increase her own workload. Theo suddenly connects the dots. He looks at her in shock, realizing she played him. He accuses her of planning this whole setup from the start to lure the girls in. Yui plays innocent, claiming she simply made a request to Theo alone, and emphasizes that the girls made the decision to join of their own free will. Having got exactly what she wanted, Yui turns to leave. She thanks Theo, saying that a troublesome matter has been settled because of him. As she walks away, she casts a glance back, internally wondering just how deep this man's influence really goes. She calls out to him, addressing him formally as Lord Theo, and asks if they're ready to get going. The group walks through a lush, elaborate garden surrounding a white gazebo. Yui comments on how magnificent the garden is, and Theo agrees, though he notes that after 3 days it just becomes background scenery. Looking around at the vegetation, Theo admits it's still amazing. Yui explains that the person they are about to meet, whom she addresses as Sensei, is the only one left who still places any importance on maintaining this place. Theo, now wearing a sling, asks Yui if she wasn't supposed to be on duty escorting the princess. Yui explains that the princess hasn't arrived yet, and more importantly, they need to treat his arm first. She states flatly that the real work won't even begin until he's healed. Theo agrees with her logic as they arrive at a wooden door covered in hanging herbs. Yui introduces the location as Master Fritz the Magician's room. Inside the greenhouse-like room filled with plants and books, Theo looks around and asks if the magician is actually there. Yui assures him that should be the case. She calls out for Professor Fritz but gets no response. Raising her voice, she yells the name louder. Suddenly, a dark shadow moves swiftly behind the foliage. A hooded figure abruptly materializes behind Yui, grabbing her breasts with both hands. The figure complains about Yui being so noisy, claiming she heard her the first time. Ignoring personal boundaries, the figure gropes Yui and notes that she has as nice a pair as ever. Yui, trying to remain professional despite being fondled, tells her master that she brought someone she wanted her to meet today. The hooded figure looks over at Canon and asks if Yui means the big-chested lady standing there. Deciding she likes Canon's vibe, the figure asks if she can squeeze her chest a little. Canon instantly rejects the request with a firm refusal. Yui steps in, identifying Canon as her sister and warning the figure, whom she calls Momiai-sensei, that she won't tolerate any rudeness. The figure sighs, complaining about how stingy they all are, and asks who the guest is. When Yui points to Theo, the figure is shocked to realize it's a man. She immediately recoils in disgust, declaring that she really hates men as she throws off her hood. The figure reveals herself to be a woman with glasses, braids, and a very revealing outfit. She looms over Theo, aggressively insulting him. She reasons that since he has no chest worth squeezing, he is useless to her. She gets right in his face with a crazed expression, demanding to know what exactly he came here for if he doesn't have any tits for her to grope. Theo stands there completely baffled, stammering in confusion at her absurd logic. Theo catches a scent in the air and immediately identifies it as cinnamon. Ray Silverhorn notices it too, mentioning there really is a sweet scent now that he points it out. Fritz looks impressed, telling Theo he's quite sharp to have noticed that. Theo is confused though, noting that if he recalls correctly, cinnamon isn't supposed to grow well in this country. He asks Fritz how she managed to pull this off. Fritz notes that Theo is quite well informed. She explains that humans always want what they can't have, and nobles are especially prone to that kind of thinking. She introduces the plant as cinnamon herb. explaining that she crossbred regular herbs with cinnamon to create a new variety that grows easily in the local soil. She admits it was quite a struggle to produce a scent so close to the real thing, but claims that in the hands of a genius mage like her, it was a piece of cake. Theo stares at the plant, calling it amazing. Theo gets excited, realizing that with this cinnamon herb, he can make so many more kinds of dishes. Ray instantly asks if that means she can eat lots of yummy food. Theo confirms it's not just food, explaining that while cinnamon is usually for desserts, it's also amazing mixed into sweet hot drinks. Ray's stomach growls loudly and she tells him to hurry up and make something. Theo starts brainstorming right there. In the background, Fritz looks a bit awkward about being ignored while they discuss recipes, muttering an apology even though it's not really her fault. Fritz abruptly changes the subject, saying nice, and then asks what his name is anyway. He answers that his name is Theo. Without wasting time, Fritz tells him to follow her. Theo is confused and asks where they are going. Fritz looks back and asks what the matter is, reminding him that he came here to get his injuries treated. Theo snaps out of his confusion and quickly agrees to go. They arrive at a wooden door and Theo asks where they are. Fritz simply says they are in her room. Theo asks if she intends to treat him right here. She confirms it, stating that her magic is a trade secret. As she speaks, a dark, swirling ball of energy begins to form in her hand. Fritz reminds him that she is a magic user after all. Theo stares at the energy in shock, exclaiming that it's healing magic. He mentions that he's heard healing magic is supposed to be extremely difficult. Fritz agrees that he's right about that. She holds up the swirling magic with a confident smile and declares that the difficulty is exactly why she is known as a genius mage. Fritz finishes casting her spell and a warm light envelops Theo's hand. As the light fades, Theo looks down in amazement, seeing that his injury is completely gone. Theo holds the jar of herbs, asking if she's sure about this since she already healed his injuries and is now giving him supplies too. Fritz brushes it off, saying she can just grow more herbs whenever she wants. However, she adds a condition with a confident pose. If he uses those herbs to make something tasty, he better let her have some too. Theo eagerly agrees, shouting that of course he will. Suddenly, the door flies open and a guard bursts in, stammering that it's an emergency. Ray sighs, commenting that it's just one man after another coming in today. The panicked guard asks for Lord Theo. When Theo identifies himself, the guard apologizes profusely, explaining he was sent under Captain Yui's orders. He drops the bombshell that the Princess of Astras has just arrived. Theo realizes they're keeping a royal VIP waiting, and in the background, Canon, Ray's S-rank adventure friend, panics and says she needs to get ready immediately. The scene shifts to the reception room where Princess Turu is already making demands. She complains about the hardness of the chair and orders it to be changed instantly. Canon, who has changed into a maid outfit to help out, thinks to herself that this girl is unbelievable. Turu continues her tirade, asking why she hasn't been offered tea yet and questioning their sense of hospitality. Canon vents to Alvin in a whisper, asking if this brat even knows who she is, but then forces a polite smile and tells the princess she'll bring tea right away. Canon pours a cup of tea, thinking that this girl is an even more outrageous princess than she imagined, but she politely tells her to help herself. Turu takes a sip and immediately criticizes Canon, calling her clumsy and starting a lecture about how someone like her wouldn't last in Astras. Canon, losing patience, dismissively says, yeah, what is it?" which causes the princess to snap and yell, "Hey you," at the disrespect. Turu spits the mouthful of hot tea directly into Canon's face. The other maids and the butler, Alba, watch in sheer horror as the liquid drenches the S-rank adventurer. Turu coldly states that the tea tastes awful and declares that when one asks for tea, it should obviously be milk tea. Canon stands there, dripping wet and trembling with rage, muttering that she can't believe this is happening. Canon apologizes and starts to say she'll remake the tea, admitting that's exactly why she needs to fix it. Turu cuts her off with a smug grin, bluntly telling her she's flat-chested. That snaps something in Canon. She yells back that the princess just has a childish palate and can't handle straight tea, adding that if milk actually made chests bigger, every woman in the world would be chugging it. Turu coolly retorts that Canon must have hated drinking milk then, implying that's why she's so small. Canon trembles with rage, muttering that she's been trying to keep her mouth shut, but she's reaching her limit. Regaining her composure, Canon looks down at the girl and says her words don't carry any weight at all. Turu stammers, calling her a brat, but Canon interrupts with a smile, offering one piece of advice. Her expression darkens ominously as she delivers a savage burn. Even she might still have a future where she grows, but there might not be any future growth for Turu, so she should live strong. Turu breaks down screaming, "You never know," at the implication that she's doomed to be flat forever. Suddenly, Alba steps in, declaring that's enough. He physically blocks Canon from getting any closer to the princess. With a terrifyingly intense glare that contrasts with his usual demeanor, the butler admits that Lady Turu was terribly rude. but he asks Canon to please let the matter rest. Canon, sweating at the man's sudden pressure, wonders who the hell this guy actually is. Just then, Theo bursts through the door, shouting Canon's name and asking if she's okay. Canon looks at him, surprised by his sudden entrance. Theo, seeing the tension, asks what's with the panicked look, but quickly realizes what he said. He frantically clarifies he didn't mean it that way, but asks if she did anything rude to the princess. Canon points at herself in total disbelief, yelling that she's the victim here. Turu demands silence, screaming that they are in front of royalty. She continues her tirade, threatening to file an official protest with the country over this treatment. Theo apologizes nervously, trying to defuse the situation. Alba bows deeply, offering his own apologies and suggesting that Lady Turu is simply tired from her long journey. Turu immediately snaps at him not to speak for her, insisting she isn't tired. Ignoring her outburst, Alba quietly hints to Theo that Lady Turu has quite the sweet tooth, while the princess continues shouting at her butler not to decide things on his own. Hearing Alba's hint, Theo mutters about something sweet. He heads straight for the kitchen, thinking to himself that he never expected this moment to come so fast. He pulls out the jar of herbs he received from Professor Fritz earlier, realizing the time to make that special dish has arrived much sooner than he thought. We jump back to the kitchen where Theo is hard at work. He grabs a couple of bright red apples, admiring their color before getting started. He slices them up with practiced precision, moving from one apple to the next, and then tosses the diced pieces into a pot to simmer them lightly. As he works, Theo is practically crying tears of joy, overwhelmed by how great it feels to simply use both of his hands for cooking again. He reminds himself that he needs to make sure Ray and Canon get plenty to eat too. He rolls out the dough, stretching it thin, and then pulls out the secret ingredient, the special herbs he received from Professor Fritz. He sprinkles them generously over the mixture. With the herb-infused apple filling arranged neatly in the tart shell, Theo layers strips of dough across the top to create a lattice pattern. Once it's assembled, he slides the whole thing straight into the oven to bake. Back in the dining room, the mood is getting restless. Someone complains about the speed, and Turu demands to know how long they're supposed to wait for this Theo guy, shouting that she's starving. Ray agrees that he's being slow, but Canon seems to realize something. She notes that if he's taking this long, it must mean he's making that specific dish. Alba watches the two adventurers nervously, thinking that the knowing smirks on their faces are genuinely creepy. Finally, Theo walks in apologizing for the wait, while Canon immediately barks at him for being late. Turu stares, bewildered, asking what on earth he's brought in. Theo wheels the cart forward, explaining that the baking process just took a bit of time. He serves up a whole pastry, introducing it as their special apple pie. As the aroma wafts through the room, Ray catches a whiff and mentions that the smell is exactly the same as before. Theo beams, pleased that she noticed the special ingredient. Theo places a slice of the pie, garnished with mint, in front of Lady Turu and invites her to taste it. She tries to maintain her haughty attitude, stammering that she's quite particular about flavors, but the moment she takes a bite, her eyes go wide. She completely loses her composure and shouts that it's delicious. Theo immediately moves to pour her tea, instructing her to enjoy it straight this time. Turu tries to protest, stuttering that she always drinks milk tea, but Theo insists on serving it black. Turu takes a bite of the pie and her eyes instantly light up with sparkle. She exclaims that it's absolutely delicious. Theo smiles, explaining his method. The sweetness of the pie is meant to mellow out the bitterness of the tea, leaving a clean aftertaste. He adds that even flavors she might not usually like can become rich and enjoyable depending on how they're paired, and promises the next pie will be even better. Turu stares at him, completely stunned by the experience. Meanwhile, in the background, Canon and Ray are completely ignoring the lecture, happily stuffing their faces with pie. Theo notices and cheerfully tells everyone to just enjoy the food. Turu turns to her butler, addressing him as Araba, and insists he should eat some too. He replies that he's already had some and agrees it is exquisite. Canon, however, is staring him down with a serious expression. She asks if he is that Araba, the guardian deity Araba, a legendary frontline adventurer. She mentions hearing he had retired but didn't expect to see him working at a palace. Canon admits she was caught off guard earlier, implying his skills are still sharp and he's far from retired. Alba just laughs it off with a ho-ho, claiming that a quiet retirement has its joys. Suddenly, Turu stands up and points directly at the cook. She demands that Theo come work in her country, declaring right then and there that she will make him her personal servant. The entire table, Canon, Ray, Theo, and even Alba, freezes in shock at the abrupt proposal. Theo starts flailing in panic, stammering that this is all way too sudden. Turu doesn't let up, insisting it's not a bad deal at all since serving royalty is a huge honor. She argues that it's a much better environment than just working as a cook, so he has no reason to refuse. Before he can answer, she turns to Alba and tells him to handle the details later, to which the butler simply bows and agrees. She tells Theo to come to Astra's once the hero festival is over. Finally finding his voice, Theo politely interrupts. He thanks her for the offer, but then bows his head and firmly states that he cannot accept, leaving Turu looking stunned. Turu is visibly offended, asking if he's really rejecting her invitation and if he cares that much about this specific castle. Theo calmly tells her no, that's not it. He clarifies that the one he serves isn't a nation or a castle, it is Ray Silverhorn alone. Turu looks confused, pointing a finger at the silver-haired girl and asking if he means that mercenary. Standing nearby, Alba observes Ray and chuckles to himself, thinking this is going to be a difficult mission for his mistress. He assesses Ray's strength, noting that if he had to fight such a woman with his old body, he wouldn't stand a chance against an S-rank adventurer. Canon confirms that Ray is indeed S-rank, though she seems a bit annoyed to admit it. Ray stands up, her figure imposing, and makes a comment about Araba being impressive, but Canon immediately gets distracted by Ray's chest size, muttering jealously about what she's got. The situation descends into chaos as Turu tries to buy Theo. She offers 10 silver coins, which gets rejected. Canon starts screaming that she's an S-rank too and that people shouldn't be judged by their chest size, completely misreading the room. Turu nervously raises the offer to gold coins, but Ray shuts it down instantly with a sharp wrong. Ray smiles warmly, explaining that Theo is someone very important to her and you can't put a price on that. Turu is left looking dejected, muttering that she just can't understand that kind of logic. Ray smiles gently at Turu, telling the young noble that she'll find someone precious someday too. Alba chuckles in the background as Ray adds that she'll understand when that time comes. Turu, looking completely defeated, grits her teeth and finally admits that she's lost this round. Just then, a booming voice interrupts them from the doorway. A massive figure declares that things look like they're getting lively and calls out to everyone. The intruder strikes a dramatic pose. It's King Dyad de Listria himself. He loudly asks if they wouldn't allow him to join in on the fun. Alba is stunned, noting that he was wondering who it was, only to find the king standing there. Theo is equally shocked to see the monarch crashing their gathering. The scene shifts to the dining table. Alba nervously introduces himself as Lady Turu's escort, while Theo explains to the others that the king insisted on coming and wouldn't take no for an answer. Along with the king, Yui and Dr. Fritz have joined the table. The king commands everyone to dig in, but then pauses when he tastes a specific dish. He notes that it uses cinnamon herb. Dr. Fritz comments that using it so soon is impressive, but the king puts on a stern face, accusing Theo of using a valuable herb without permission. Theo immediately panics, apologizing profusely and declaring he's ready for any punishment. Suddenly, the king bursts into loud laughter and shouts his approval. He tells Theo it's delicious and demands he make it again. Theo stammers a weak agreement, relieved it was just a joke. But the king isn't done. He says he's getting hungry again and wants something hearty since they're already eating. Theo frantically says he'll make some right now, but then Ray chimes in, saying she wants to eat too because she hasn't had enough either. Theo is left begging them to wait just a moment as the orders pile up. Later, outside in the town, preparations for the festival are underway. Two workers sit down on a scaffold to take a quick break, noting that it looks like they'll manage to get everything ready in time. One of the workers leans in and asks his buddy if he's heard the rumor going around. The other guy acts vague, asking what kind of rumors he means. The first worker drops the bomb. People are saying the Demon Lord might be revived at this year's Hero Festival. He adds that this kind of talk has been circulating lately. His friend gets nervous, dismissing it as just a rumor and wondering why something so disturbing would even start spreading. Suddenly, a woman with long hair interrupts their conversation. She scolds them, pointing out that if they start talking about bad omens before the festival even begins, the hero himself will be saddened. The workers immediately back down, laughing nervously and apologizing for the dark topic. Back near the festival preparations, the workers are hustling to get everything done. One guy tells his buddy there's still work to do, and the other snaps at him to get moving. Watching from the shadows is the long-haired woman from before. She sighs, muttering about their bickering before looking up at the starry sky. She muses to herself that heroes and demon lords are supposed to be fairy tales, yet she feels a strange connection to this festival. Unknown to anyone, a sealed demon lord from the distant past is secretly beginning to stir beneath the land. The scene shifts to the city streets, which are absolutely packed with people for the festival. Walking through the bustling crowd are Theo and Lady Turu. Turu looks absolutely thrilled to be out and about, while Theo looks like a nervous wreck sweating buckets as he tries to keep up. Turu turns back with a huge smile, urging everyone to hurry up and go already. Theo follows along, internally asking himself why things ended up like this. Behind him, the entire escort squad, Alba, Canon, and Ray are trudging along with totally dead expressions, clearly dragged into this against their will. They eventually arrive at a building and head inside. In the hallway, Alba stops Theo for a private moment. He calls out to Theo, bowing slightly, and says he wants to thank him because of what he did. Theo looks confused and asks what he's being thanked for. Alba smiles warmly and explains it's about Lady Turu. He hasn't seen her this happy in a long time. Theo gets flustered, waving his hands and saying no thanks are needed since he was just desperate to survive the cooking challenge himself. But Alba suddenly gets serious. He leans in close and drops a heavy truth on Theo. Lady Turu is not a child born between the king and the queen. Theo lets out a shocked noise. Alba explains that the queen was unable to have children, but the king refused to marry anyone else. Alba continues the story, explaining that to leave an heir, the king had an outsider bear the child. That decision caused a massive rift between the king and queen, and gradually, the king's relationships with everyone around him became distorted. Theo realizes this family drama is the root of Tururu's behavior. Alba acknowledges that he's aware of the situation, but admits that the tragic backstory doesn't justify Tururu troubling everyone else. After an awkward laugh from Theo, Alba bows deeply and says he has one request. Alba continues his serious conversation with Theo in the hallway. He asks Theo to look out for Lady Tururu, but only within whatever limits he can manage. It's just a request from an old busybody, nothing more. Theo stammers, asking why he was chosen for this role and questioning his ability to guide anyone. Alba reassures him, expressing his belief that Theo has a special power to positively influence those around him. When Theo still looks unsure, Alba firmly tells him that he can do it. The butler claims he understands because of an old man's intuition. He then hands Theo a folded object. Theo looks confused as he accepts it, realizing it's a handkerchief. Alba confirms it's a handkerchief with his name embroidered on it. He explains that it might be useful to show this item if something happens later. It is the fullest token of sincerity he can offer as a butler. Theo thanks him, though he's still sweating and confused, asking why Alba is telling him all this. Alba repeats that it's just a hunch. But internally, Alba envisions a bright future where, if Theo gets involved, Tururu could become a fine queen who is beloved by her people. With that heavy conversation concluded, the scene shifts. Theo narrates that because the king liked the apple pie he made earlier, he was officially put in charge of attending to Lady Tururu. Immediately exercising her authority, Tururu demanded to go out into the city. So the whole group ended up taking a walk through the town. They stop in front of a fancy building and Tururu decides the shop looks nice, declaring that they're going inside. They step into a high-end jewelry store filled with sparkling chandeliers and expensive displays. Theo looks around in awe, muttering that it's amazing. Alvin stands beside him and explains that this is the best jewelry store in the entire town. Canon is already browsing the merchandise. She spots something she likes, murmuring that it's not a bad idea, and immediately tries on a massive diamond necklace. Theo freaks out, waving his hands and calling her an idiot, terrified she might scratch the expensive merchandise. Canon just laughs it off, saying if she scratches it, she'll simply buy it. Theo suddenly remembers that despite her behavior, she is an S-rank adventurer with plenty of money. Just then, another voice calls out for Theo to look over at something else. Canon slips a large jeweled ring onto her finger and holds it up to the light. She turns to Theo with a confident smile, asking if it suits her. Theo stares at her, completely stunned, and admits that she looks so good he's actually at a loss for words. Canon starts posing aggressively, demanding more attention. She insists the look isn't that bad, but the group just stares at her blankly. Losing her temper, she yells at Theo, Ray, and Alvin, complaining that they're way too honest with their lackluster reactions and asking them to be a little more considerate. Ray finally chimes in with a deadpan expression, flatly stating that it suits her. Canon immediately snaps back, yelling that Ray is even more monotone than usual and demanding to know what that's supposed to mean. Moving on to the next display, Lady Tururu tries on a sparkling tiara. She turns to Theo, looking a bit vulnerable, and asks him if he thinks it suits her. She presses him to be honest about it. Theo blushes, looking a bit flustered, and tells her sincerely that it suits her very well. He was just at a loss for words because of how good she looked. Tururu blushes, touching the tiara and asking if he really means it. Alba chuckles from the side, observing that she seems very pleased to be praised by Lord Theo. Theo stammers, surprised that he's being put on the spot, but Alba adds that words from someone sincere carry real weight. Tururu turns away, hiding her face as she admits the whole thing is kind of embarrassing. The group's attention turns to a massive gem on display called White Bright. Alba explains that it's a special gemstone meant to be given to someone precious. Theo listens as the butler describes how the stone holds magical power and can seal a single spell inside it. Theo wonders if something like that could be misused, but Alba clarifies that there was a catch. The magic in the stone could only be activated by two people who truly loved each other. Alba laughs, noting that there are funny stories of cases where the gem simply wouldn't activate. Theo laughs awkwardly, while in the background Canon looks stressed while holding one of the rings, realizing it's the same material. Meanwhile, Turu quietly touches the pendant around her neck. She realizes it's the same stone, one she received from her mother as a token of the queen's love. But as she touches it, a dark thought crosses her mind. She can't trust something like that. Lady Turu storms out of the jewelry shop, shouting that they're moving on to the next location immediately. Alba and Theo trail behind her, but she suddenly stops in her tracks, declaring that this next spot will be the last one. Out on the street, the atmosphere shifts into a high-stakes duel. Canon and Ray stand facing each other, looking dead serious. Someone calls out that it's a match, and Ray tells her opponent to bring it on. They lock eyes, screaming rock, paper, scissors with the intensity of a life-or-death battle. They throw their hands out simultaneously, and the sound pops through the air. Ray stares at the result and notes that it's another tie. Canon, looking just as focused, agrees with the assessment. The two S-rank adventurers immediately go into the next round, shouting to try again over and over. Watching from the sidelines, Alba observes that these two are on a completely different level from normal people. The narration explains that because they're such elite fighters, they read their opponent's muscle movements in the split second before the hand swings down, and since they both react instantly to each other, the result is an endless loop of ties. Theo just stands there totally lost. Finally, both girls collapse on the pavement, completely exhausted. Ray pants heavily, noting that they've hit 30 draws in a row and admitting Canon has improved. Canon snaps back that she never thought she was inferior to Ray in the first place. Theo looks down at the two panting girls and asks why on earth they're playing rock, paper, scissors again. Ray turns to him with a terrifyingly serious expression and explains the stakes. She put everything on the line for the right to have Theo tell her, "It looks good on you." Theo freezes, wondering how the situation spiraled into this. Canon glares at Theo with scary eyes, telling him to shut up because they are in the middle of a serious match and his words are tasteless. Theo panics, waving his hands frantically. He argues that even if they win, words forced out of him wouldn't make them happy, and insists that he gives proper compliments when he actually means them. The logic hits the girls hard. Canon looks down, admitting he has a point, and even Ray realizes she wouldn't be happy with a coerced compliment. Theo nervously seizes the chance to tell them to calm down. Theo catches up to the group on the street, wiping sweat from his forehead and expressing relief that they are safe. Alba looks surprised to see him and the others appear so suddenly. Theo notices Lady Turu walking away from the group and realizes by the look on her back that she must be feeling incredibly lonely. He turns to Alba and apologizes for interrupting, but decides he needs to step in. Alba calls out for Lady Turu to wait, but she snaps back aggressively, asking if he isn't glad to finally be rid of a nuisance. Theo cuts in, realizing Alba must have said something to her earlier. He bows his head, apologizing for being meddlesome, but refuses to back down. He shouts to Turu that despite the intrusion, he might be able to help improve the relationship between her and her mother. Turu stops and turns around, looking at him with total skepticism. She asks what someone like him could possibly do to help. She admits she doesn't understand his angle at all. Theo simply asks her to please let him try one thing. The scene then shifts from the street to the interior of a kitchen. Inside the kitchen, Theo drops the plan. They are going to make a meal. Turu looks at him blankly and asks what he's talking about. Theo asks if she has any cooking experience, and she bluntly replies that of course she doesn't. Instead of being discouraged, Theo smiles and says that's actually good, promising that it's going to be absolutely perfect. Turu remains unconvinced, arguing that a recipe is a trivial thing and he is exaggerating its importance. Theo corrects her immediately, explaining that cooking is troublesome and takes effort, and that is exactly why it conveys feelings to the other person. He tells her to learn the recipe he's teaching today and make it for her mother, assuring her that her feelings will definitely reach whoever eats it. Theo remarks that Lady Turu reminds him of someone named Roberta. Turu gets defensive and snaps back, asking what he knows about anything. Ignoring her attitude, Theo declares it's time to start. He places a large cabbage on the counter and instructs her to tear off the leaves by hand while he removes the core with a kitchen knife. Theo starts the cooking lesson by asking Lady Turu if she has ever held a kitchen knife before. She immediately gets defensive, snapping back that of course she hasn't. Unfazed, Theo tells her he understands and instructs her to start by gripping the handle. He guides her on how to use her other hand to stabilize the vegetable, and she successfully slices into the cabbage. Turu gets excited, shouting that it actually cut. Moving on to the filling, Theo lists out the ingredients like minced meat, onions, breadcrumbs, and eggs, instructing her to put them all in a bowl and mix them well. Turu hesitates, visibly grossed out by the texture of the raw meat, complaining that it's slimy and disgusting. Theo just laughs and encourages her to do her best. He explains the next steps, telling her to boil the cabbage leaves and drain them. Then they move on to shaping the meat mixture. Turu gingerly shapes a patty, unsure if she's doing it right, but Theo gives her a confidence boost by telling her it's perfect. He then guides her to place the shaped meat onto the prepared cabbage leaves. Theo instructs her to wrap the meat with the cabbage leaf. Turu manages to fold one up and shows it off, proudly asking how it looks and noting that she rolled it pretty well herself. Following Theo's lead, they pack the cabbage rolls tightly into a pot. He tells her to pour in some water, add consommé, and finally toss in a bay leaf to season the broth. The pot begins to simmer, and Turu asks what they should do next. Theo tells her there's nothing left to do but wait for it to finish cooking. Turu stares out the window, looking anxious as she wonders aloud if her mother will actually eat what she made. Just then, outside the mansion, a carriage pulls up. A voice announces their arrival, addressing a woman named Lady Shirl as the door opens. A woman steps elegantly out of the carriage. It is a beautiful lady with long, light hair who looks very similar to Turu. She stands before the estate and states that she knows Turu is right here. Back in the kitchen, the cabbage rolls are steaming hot and smelling ready. Turu asks if it's about time to take them off the heat. Theo checks the pot and confirms that it's looking good. Suddenly, he hears a commotion from the front of the house and turns his head, wondering who has arrived at this hour. Theo asks the unexpected visitor who she is. The woman politely introduces herself as Shirl, but then she drops a major piece of information. She reveals that she is actually Turu's mother. Theo tries to be polite, confirming that she's Turu's mother and asking what brings her here. Shirl explains that she heard Turu was at this location. While she's talking, the gears in Theo's head start turning. He realizes if Turu is a noble, or rather royalty, and this is her mother, that means he's standing in front of the queen. He completely loses his cool, screaming out in shock and stammering, "Your Majesty." Shirl nervously confirms his suspicion just as the butler, Alba, arrives on the scene, greeting Lady Shirl with relief. Theo turns to the butler, frantically asking if he was the one who called her and told her to wait here. Alba calmly confirms it, explaining that he sent a message using a bird. Theo looks absolutely baffled by the idea of using a bird for communication. Suddenly, the door swings open and Turu steps out, complaining about the noise outside. She seems to be muttering to herself about her cooking success to calm her nerves as she walks into the yard. The moment Turu walks out, she freezes. She stammers out "Mother" in disbelief. Shirl looks at her daughter with emotion and calls her name. Turu stands there in shock for a moment, staring wide-eyed, but that shock quickly morphs into a look of intense annoyance and anger. Turu immediately gets defensive, shouting at her mother and asking why she came all the way out here. Shirl looks hurt, stammering that she heard Turu went out alone and she just got worried. Turu snaps back, yelling that she never asked for her mother's worry. Shirl looks heartbroken, thinking to herself that this isn't how she wanted this conversation to go, sadly whispering her daughter's name. Before the argument can escalate further, Theo steps in. He places a hand gently on Turu's head and tells her it's time to prepare the meal. Shirl lets out a confused "huh" at the sudden interruption, while Theo shoots a confident wink, signaling he's got this under control. Theo diffuses the tension by acting like a proper host. He invites Shirl, addressing her as "Your Majesty," to come inside, announcing that Lady Turu has prepared a special meal for her. He asks if she would like to stay and eat. Shirl looks completely stunned by this news, asking in disbelief if Turu actually cooked. The scene shifts to the kitchen where the pot is steaming hot. Theo declares it's time to open the lid, but Turu looks nervous and hesitant. Turu is panicking internally, sweating and worrying about what she'll do if the food tastes bad. She remembers Theo's coaching. He told her to have confidence because she worked so hard, but also mentioned it wasn't finished yet. In the present, Turu looks confused by that statement. Theo explains that they need to put her feelings into the final presentation. Turu points out that the cooking is done and it just needs to be plated, and Theo agrees that's exactly where the magic happens. Theo explains his philosophy. When you plate a dish while thinking of the person who will eat it, the food becomes much more delicious. Turu asks if he really means just thinking of them, and he confirms it. Flustered but willing, she says she'll give it a try, though she stammers that it's not like she believes in superstitions. As she thinks of her mother and scoops up the food, she starts to admit a hidden truth to herself. The finished dish, rolled cabbage, sits on the plate. Shirl stares at it, asking in shock if Turu really made this. Theo happily confirms it with a big smile. Shirl steels herself, says she'll accept the offer, and takes a bite. Shirl's eyes light up immediately and she exclaims that it's delicious. Turu looks away, blushing and embarrassed, telling her mother she doesn't need to flatter her. Shirl insists it's the truth, claiming Turu might be even better than their royal chef. Turu grumbles that her mother is always exaggerating, but then quietly admits that if she really means it, she's happy to hear it. Turu watches her mother, noting internally that she is smiling. As Shirl enjoys the meal with a gentle, happy expression, tears silently fall onto the table. Turu finally breaks down, tears streaming down her face. She admits the truth is that she wanted to stay like this forever. She apologizes to her mother for everything that's happened all this time. Cheryl looks at her daughter tenderly and tells Turu to lift her head. Cheryl takes the blame onto herself, telling Turu it's her responsibility that her daughter had to go through such things. She smiles through her own tears and tells Turu that the rolled cabbage she made was more delicious than any she has ever had before. She apologizes for being an inadequate mother and asks if Turu will make the dish for her again. Overwhelmed, Turu sobs and agrees. Turu cries out for her mother as they embrace tightly, finally reconciling. Watching from the doorway, Alba the butler and Theo witness the emotional reunion. Alba looks deeply moved, while Theo smiles and scratches his cheek, happy that things worked out. Outside the mansion, the family prepares to leave. Cheryl thanks Theo for all his help. She explains that they'll be staying in the country for a while until the Hero Festival begins and tells him not to hesitate to visit if he ever needs anything. The carriage rolls away and Theo watches them go, the family drama finally resolved. Back inside the dining room, the mood shifts completely. Ray, Canon, and Alvin are absolutely devouring the leftover cabbage rolls. Theo notes that it's a good thing he made plenty separately as they demand seconds. Sitting calmly among the chaotic eaters, Captain Yui wipes her mouth and praises the food, stating that she just had Lord Theo's cooking for the first time and it truly is exquisite. Canon suddenly realizes who is sitting there and points a finger in shock, asking why on earth Captain Yui is hanging out with them. Yui ignores the outburst and focuses on Theo. She remarks on how impressive it is that he managed to resolve the Restoria family's complication. She looks at him with admiration, saying that Lord Theo is an even greater man than she imagined. Theo nervously asks if she came all this way just to say that. Yui's expression turns serious as she tells him there is actually more to discuss. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Theo says he understands and suggests they change locations to talk privately. Theo stands up from the table and tells the group he's going to step out to talk for a bit. Yui turns to Ray, assuring her that it's okay and nothing to worry about. Ray gives a short nod, agreeing to let them go. Of course, Canon can't let him leave without a jab, smirking as she asks if he's gone and got himself a new woman again. She calls him a sly one, while the rest of the table descends into a bit of chaotic bickering, but Theo manages to slip away with Yui. Once they're outside the mansion, Theo asks Yui what exactly she wanted to discuss. Yui can tell from his face that he's expecting more drama, correctly guessing that he thinks it's just another troublesome matter. Theo laughs nervously, busted. Yui decides to skip the small talk and starts with the conclusion. She drops a massive bombshell. She believes the Demon King is about to be resurrected. Theo screams in total shock, stammering that this is way too sudden. Ignoring his panic, Yui holds up a pendant and asks him to look at it. She explains the design features the hero's sword and a crest of light. It's the Silverhorn family crest. She then reveals a heavy truth to Theo. The Silverhorn family line, including Ray, are actually direct descendants of the legendary hero. Yui continues laying out the grim facts. She describes a dreadful presence crawling up from the depths of the earth and points out that monsters are growing more violent in response. To her, this means the Demon King's seal is close to breaking. Theo tries to wave it off, laughing anxiously and saying that's a huge leap in logic. But internally, he's thinking that even if she's right, he has absolutely zero power to do anything about it. Yui acknowledges that Theo doesn't have any martial strength to speak of. However, she counters that he has a special power to captivate anyone he meets. She looks him dead in the eye and says she believes that power of his might even be enough to reach the Demon King. Theo insists she's overestimating him, but Yui just gives a mysterious chuckle saying who knows. Theo is left standing there, totally overwhelmed and thinking that even if she says that, it doesn't make it any easier. Meanwhile, back inside the mansion, the mood couldn't be more different. Ray is happily chomping down on some pickled vegetables, sighing with satisfaction and noting how light and delicious the food is, completely unbothered by the potential end of the world. Back at the dinner table, Ray mentions that she has to head out again tomorrow for a monster hunt. She notes that a lot of requests are piling up because strong monsters have been appearing more frequently lately. Theo acknowledges she's been busy, but he looks a bit concerned and tells her to be careful out there. Ray just brushes it off with a blank expression, saying she'll be fine. Later that night, Theo is sitting alone in his room, staring out into the darkness. He can't get Captain Yui's words out of his head about the Demon King being resurrected. The warning weighs heavily on him. Suddenly, a knock comes at the door, snapping him out of his spiraling thoughts. He gets up, wondering who it could be at this hour. He opens the door and is completely floored. Ray is standing there wearing a fancy, off-the-shoulder dress that definitely isn't her usual armor. Theo stammers loudly, asking what is up with that outfit. Ray explains that since they won't see each other for a while, she thought they could sleep together tonight. She asks if that's not okay, leaving Theo completely shocked and panicking over the phrasing. Inside the room, Ray instructs Theo to sit down on the bed. Theo obeys but is sweating bullets, his mind racing with the idea that no man alive could say no to a situation like this. But then Ray just sighs and plops herself down, laying her head right on his lap. Theo yells out in surprise as she gets comfortable and tells him to relax. Lying on his lap, Ray looks up at him with a serious, gentle expression. She tells him that she'll protect him. She admits she doesn't know exactly what Yui told him earlier, but she insists he shouldn't worry about it. Theo tries to reassure her that it's okay and they just talked a little, but she's focused entirely on comforting him. And just like that, she's out cold. Theo yells that she fell asleep way too fast. Looking down at the sleeping face of the girl who cares so much about him, his expression softens. He makes a silent vow in that quiet moment. He swears in his heart that he'll do anything he can for Ray. Even though the world is starting to shift in dangerous ways, right now, he feels completely at peace. Theo is walking through the bustling streets, noticing that the whole town has already shifted into full-on festival mode. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out to Mr. Barton. It's Uncle Bartle, the vegetable shopkeeper, who waves and asks if Theo is out on his own today. Theo explains that Ray and the others are currently out hunting. Bartle nods, understanding that they must be busy, but Theo can't help but notice the massive amount of groceries in Bartle's arms. Bartle suddenly gets fired up, shouting that obviously he's stocking up because the Hero Festival only comes once a year. It's the absolute best time to make money, so he has to give it his all. Theo laughs awkwardly and tells him to do his best, but Bartle immediately pivots, grinning and saying that of course, Theo will be helping out too. Just as Theo stammers a hesitant reply, a female voice cuts in from off-screen, noting that Theo is in high demand as always. Night Captain Yui appears with her squad and the townspeople immediately recognize her. She greets them politely, and Theo remarks that it's rare to see her on patrol. Yui explains that with the Hero Festival approaching, they're reinforcing security. Beside Theo, Uncle Bartle is sweating bullets, completely floored that Theo actually knows someone of her stature. While Theo looks confused by his reaction, Bartle is internally freaking out, recalling that Yui is one of the biggest names in knight history, a prodigy who became captain at the youngest age ever and boasts strength rivaling S-rank adventurers. Yui chuckles at the reaction, noting that Bartle isn't entirely wrong about her reputation, but she suggests the truly exceptional one is actually the man standing right beside him. Bartle looks totally lost, so Yui turns her attention to Theo. She formally thanks him for his help with the incident involving Captain Bram the other day. She explains that Bram had deep underworld connections, but thanks to the investigation, they managed to root out all the corruption in the Order. However, she admits that the cleanup has left them short-handed, keeping her constantly on duty. Theo thanks her for her hard work, but Yui adds that she actually has a request for him as well. Stepping in closer, Yui reminds him of what she mentioned before about when the time comes. She tells him she has high hopes for him and then walks off with her squad. Theo sweats, muttering that he doesn't know what to do with that kind of pressure. He notices Bartle backing away from him with a look of awe and asks what he's doing. Bartle tries to deny it, but internally, he's convinced that Theo is actually one hell of a man. Theo panics, frantically waving his hands and shouting that he's just an ordinary guy, and it's all a misunderstanding. Bartle doesn't look convinced, muttering about the ordinary claim while Theo insists it's a joke. Deep down, the name Theo seems to echo in his mind alongside his denial. Meanwhile, among the departing knights, Shilty is visibly upset. He questions Captain Yui, asking if this is really all right. When Yui asks what's wrong, Shilty snaps back, complaining about that man and telling her she's being incredibly naive. Back with the knights, Yui continues her conversation with Shilty. She tells him bluntly that they have to use any piece on the board they can. Shilty lets out a surprised noise, and Yui admits that winning in battle won't be easy, but she emphasizes that this situation and that are two different matters. Shilty concedes that she's right, though he admits he was convinced she had just taken a personal liking to Theo. Yui chides him, saying it's a bad habit to only see things from one perspective. Shilty pushes back, arguing that relying on outside help would disgrace the honor of the knights. Yui asks if he forgot something important. She hates troublesome things. She envisions a dark future where the Demon King returns, noting that if that happens, it's the knights who will have to face it head-on. She grimly adds that amid such a fierce battle, many lives would surely be lost. And just thinking about the headache of cleaning up that mess makes her hate responsibility even more. Shilty asks the hard question, what if that man fails? Yui smiles confidently and says when the time comes, they'll just have to do their best together, everyone. She turns to walk away, muttering to herself that there's no point worrying about problems that haven't happened yet. She orders Shilty to focus on the security maintenance in front of him for now. The knights shout an affirmative yes. As she leaves, the scene cuts to Theo staring blankly. Moving on to the mansion, Theo walks outside and finds Alvin and Canon completely collapsed face down on the pavement. He asks what on earth they're doing. They both let out weak groans, and Canon manages to wheeze out that she's so hungry she can't even move. A bit later inside, the table is piled high with stacks of empty bowls. Canon pats her stomach, announcing she's stuffed, while Alvin sighs that he almost starved to death. Theo, looking exhausted by their antics, begs them to please just eat something before it gets to that point next time. As Alvin dismissively tells Canon good job in the background, causing her to snap back at him for his lack of appreciation, Theo sets a glass down in front of Canon. She looks at it curiously, asking what it is. Theo explains it's a chocolate parfait for dessert. Canon immediately dives in, shouting that it's so good and declaring that dessert goes in a separate stomach before instantly demanding another one. Watching them eat, Theo asks what happened to Ray. Canon explains that Ray probably went to report the quest completion. Alvin adds that Ray said he was fine alone, so the two of them came back first. Canon notes that he should be back around now. Continuing from the previous scene, we see Ray has finally returned, but she's collapsed face down on the pavement outside, looking just as exhausted as the others were. Inside, Canon is slumped over the table next to a stack of empty bowls, groaning that she ate so much she can't move, though she jokingly asks for a rerun. Meanwhile, Ray has made it inside and is happily eating a parfait. She admits to Theo that she held back her hunger all day just so she could fill up on his cooking. Theo, always the provider, hands her the dessert with a smile. Now the whole squad, Alvin, Canon, and Ray, are lined up at the counter eating parfaits. Canon happily declares that dessert goes in a totally different stomach. Alvin points out that Ray could have just eaten something while she was out, but Ray ignores him, thinking to herself that if she's going to eat, she wants to be full on Theo's cooking. Canon agrees, saying she can't eat regular meals anymore, and even Alvin admits that once you know this taste, it's hard to go back. In perfect sync, all three of them hold up their empty glasses and shout for seconds, leaving Theo to just awkwardly accept his fate. Later that night, the house is quiet. Alvin and Canon are sound asleep in their beds. In the kitchen, Theo is trying to prep some ingredients, but his knife just bounces off the food. He grunts, trying to force it, but the blade is completely dull. He steps back, realizing this isn't going to work. Theo inspects the knife, muttering that the sharpness has really dropped. He wonders if he should try to sharpen it. Suddenly, Ray appears behind him and accuses him of thinking about something bad with that serious look on his face. Theo panics and denies it, explaining that he's just stressed because the knife is dull. Ray immediately offers a solution, saying she knows a good shop if he needs a replacement. Theo thinks it over and agrees it's time for a new one, so they decide to head out. They arrive at the shop Ray recommended, but it's not exactly a home goods store. The place is packed with massive swords, axes, and heavy chains. Theo looks around nervously, stammering that he thought they were here for a kitchen knife. He has to admit the blades look sharp, but they're definitely weapons. From the back of the shop, a rough voice calls out, asking if that's Ray. A large, scarred blacksmith steps forward, looking like he's seen 100 battles. He casually asks Ray what she's trying to hack apart this time, guessing it might be a dragon or a troll king. Ray screams at him that she wants a kitchen knife for home use. The blacksmith sweats, reminding her that they are a weaponsmith and she should probably go to a general store for that kind of thing. But as he looks closer, he suddenly stops mid-sentence, looking completely shocked. The blacksmith turns to shout at his assistant in the back, asking about a knife that was supposedly made for the hero festival. The assistant calls back that the guy picked it up 2 days ago. Turning back to his customers, the blacksmith tells Ray that if they had come just a bit earlier, he might have been able to give them that one. However, he reveals that he just happened to forge another knife recently, and warns them to brace themselves for the details. He proudly explains that he forged this new blade from a unicorn horn, calling it something truly special. Theo stares in awe, muttering about the rare material, but Ray just looks blank and asks if that's actually supposed to be amazing. The blacksmith yells back that of course it is. He boasts that the knife is so sharp it could slice the entire kitchen in half if he wanted it to, though he quickly admits that might be a slight exaggeration. Ray immediately decides she wants it. The blacksmith notes her sudden interest but explains there's a catch. To get the knife, she has to win a contest. Theo is confused, so the blacksmith clarifies that it's the competition to decide the dancing shrine maiden, and the knife is being offered as an extra prize for the winner. Ray nods along, but then pauses and asks what exactly a dancing shrine maiden is. The blacksmith looks baffled that she doesn't know, asking if she hasn't seen it at least once, while Theo awkwardly raises his hand to admit he has no idea either. The blacksmith sighs and explains that it's part of the hero festival. Every year, they hold a contest to choose a representative who will perform a ritual dance at the conclusion of the event. Without hesitation, Ray asks if there's still time to enter. Theo panics, asking if she's really going to do this, but Ray just confirms it and asks if there's a problem. While Theo drifts off into a fantasy, completely convinced that Ray would look insanely beautiful in the shrine maiden outfit, the blacksmith gives them practical advice. He tells them the entry deadline is likely today, so they need to hurry to the registration desk at the festival grounds. The scene shifts to the town square, where two men are manning a reception desk. Ray walks right up to the desk and asks if this is the sign-up spot for the contest. One of the clerks nudges his partner, whispering that she looks familiar. The other clerk stares, thinking it can't possibly be who he thinks it is. Nervous, he asks for her name just to be sure. When she answers Ray Silverhorn, the clerk breaks into a cold sweat, realizing it's actually the real S-rank adventurer standing right in front of him. At the registration desk, the crowd starts freaking out as they realize the applicant is none other than Ray Silverhorn, the S-rank adventurer. They can't believe someone of her status would enter a contest like this. Ray ignores the chatter and asks the receptionist if the deadline has passed. The receptionist, totally flustered by her presence, stammers that they are still accepting entries. He quickly adds that for an S-rank adventurer, he'll make an exception and waive the usual requirements. The crowd murmurs in admiration, saying she's so cool and competent. Ray simply states that her rank doesn't matter here, she is just participating as herself. The receptionist, now acting like a fanboy, asks for her autograph and Ray agrees, taking the pen he offers. Just then, a woman with long dark hair storms up to them, accusing them of trying to bribe their way in. She declares that she doesn't care if Ray is S-rank or not. Someone with such wicked motives will never be chosen as the priestess. She aggressively shouts that no matter who her opponent is, she has no intention of giving up her title as the dancing priestess. Theo, completely confused by this random hostility, politely asks who she is. This only makes her angrier, and she screams that her name is Melia Lewitt, insisting that if they are entering the contest, they should at least know the name of the champion. A bystander nearby is shocked that Theo and Ray don't know who she is. Theo awkwardly admits they have no clue. The bystander explains that Melia is a famous dancer who has been chosen as the festival shrine maiden for 4 years in a row. He adds that she is incredibly popular, and people come to the festival specifically just to see her perform in her elaborate gowns. The man asks if they just arrived in the country and recommends they watch her at least once. Theo tries to laugh it off, saying it's not really like that, while Ray bluntly states she isn't interested and walks away. Ray walks right past Melia, coolly stating that it doesn't matter who her opponent is because she is going to win. Melia is left stunned by the confidence, thinking that Ray certainly has guts. As Ray walks off, she internally reaffirms that she will definitely take the victory. Melia stays behind, glaring daggers at their backs. Theo catches up to Ray, scratching his head and commenting on how intense the whole encounter was. Later, Melia is walking alone down a stone street, anxiously biting her thumbnail. Her face is twisted in anger as she rants to herself about the S-rank adventurer and how everyone seems to be fawning over them. She stomps down a dark alleyway, muttering that she can't forgive this situation and swearing she will never give up the title, no matter what happens. Suddenly, a figure in a dark hooded cloak appears behind her in the alley and asks if she wants some help. Melia spins around, demanding to know who they are. The hooded figure ignores the question and notes that she is the famous priestess of the dance. However, the stranger ominously adds that unfortunately, this year she won't make the cut. Melia yells again, asking who this person is. The hooded figure smirks and calls her a rude guy, claiming to have already answered that question just a moment ago. Back in the dark alley, the hooded figure reaches a hand out toward Melia, claiming they just want to help her. The scene shifts to show the passage of time, with narration noting that the day of the destined festival is drawing near. We see Melia walking through the city streets at night, looking troubled, while elsewhere, the Knights and Theo's group are busy making their final preparations for the big event. The vibe switches completely as loud music blasts from a set of speakers. Inside a dance studio, a passionate instructor with curly hair is coaching the group. She shouts out her philosophy that dance is singing, urging her students to use their whole bodies to express themselves. She tells everyone to go all out today as well, keeping the energy high. Canon, Ray, and Theo are dressed in workout gear and look totally pumped, shouting a loud yes in response. The instructor announces that the music is starting and hits the play button on the cassette deck. As the beat drops, Ray looks intensely focused, and the three of them raise their hands in rhythm, ready to start their routine. The trio moves in perfect sync, striking a pose on one leg while shouting "hey" together. They immediately transition into another dynamic formation, yelling "Wonderwho" with huge smiles. The instructor watches them closely, building up the momentum, and then screams for them to hit the finale with a dramatic shout of "Finish death." Canon is beaming as she dances, looking light on her feet and genuinely having a great time with the choreography. Right beside her, Theo and Ray are matching that energy perfectly. They're both grinning and striking dynamic poses, fully committed to the performance as sparkles seem to fly around them. Back in the studio, the group takes a breather with water bottles on the floor. Theo wipes off some sweat and mentions that the dance today felt great. Canon agrees, noting that they're finally getting in sync. Smiling, Theo asks the big question: if they keep this up, does she think they can actually win the tournament? Ray is supportive immediately, telling him of course they can, but Canon suddenly snaps. Her face turns furious as she screams that it's obviously impossible. Canon launches into a lecture, demanding to know what they think the Shrine Maidens of Dance are actually for. She explains that dancing isn't just a show, it's strictly a ritual offering to the hero. She warns them that with such flashy, modern moves, they are disrespecting the tradition. Theo tries to tell her to calm down, but she strikes a dramatic pose and yells absolutely not, claiming that dance is pure emotion, mimicking their eccentric teacher's death catchphrase. Outside the building, Melia is watching their practice through a window with a look of pure disgust. She mutters that they're just a bunch of jokers. Inside, Canon continues scolding the group, telling them they need to start by studying history, and the group meekly responds with a yes, ma'am. Back outside, Melia trembles with rage, vowing to herself that she will never lose to losers like them. Melia walks away from the studio down the street, scratching her head in frustration. She wonders if she's just overthinking things. She tries to reassure herself, thinking that even if that woman is an S-rank adventurer, she's a total amateur when it comes to dancing. She tells herself that if there ever comes a time she loses to someone like that, it would mean something is seriously wrong. In a dark alleyway, Melia is talking to the hooded figure again. The figure confirms her worst fears, telling her that the tournament is rigged and the winner has already been decided in advance. He asks her if she didn't find it strange that an S-rank adventurer participated so naturally. Then leaning in, he drops a massive secret. Just between them, Ray Silverhorn and the captain of this country's knights are actually related by blood. Melia freezes in shock at the news. Stammering, Melia asks so what, and demands to know how he even has that information. The hooded figure just chuckles, claiming he has a bit of a special connection, though he says the source doesn't really matter. He raises his hand to stop her questions, clarifying that he doesn't want her to misunderstand. He isn't her enemy. Placing his hand against the brick wall, he activates a glowing magic circle and tells her simply that he wants to help her. The scene shifts to a darker location. A heavy stone door slides open with a grinding sound, revealing a hooded figure standing amidst the dust and shadows. Melia stands behind him, her eyes wide with apprehension as she stammers. She looks down to see a staircase descending into the earth, shocked to discover a basement hidden here. The hooded figure beckons her forward, instructing her to come with him. He tells her that from this point on, it will be just the two of them. As they begin to descend the stone steps into the darkness, he suggests they have a secret conversation. Melia follows but looks at him with deep suspicion, demanding to know who he really is and if he is truly the person she thinks he is. Melia looks around the stone walls as they walk down, remarking that she had no idea a place like this existed within the city. The hooded figure replies that no one knows about it except for the two of them now. Melia presses him for answers, asking what his goal is and why he brought her to such a special, hidden location. The figure dismisses her concerns, stating it's a simple story. A creepy grin forms beneath his hood as he tells her plainly that he likes her dancing. Back in the city, the festival atmosphere is in full swing. The streets are lined with food stalls, and someone comments on how delicious everything looks. Lady Turu is sampling a skewer, and she coolly judges the taste as merely decent. Nearby, her mother, Lady Cheryl, looks over the cooking meat with a troubled expression, but for a very different reason. She asks if they should just buy everything and hire the cooks as their personal chefs. Theo, sweating a bit, tells her that might be a bit excessive. Just then, Canon spots the young noble and calls out to Lady Turu, while Theo looks surprised to run into them. The reunion is chaotic immediately. Ray is stuffing her face with food, speaking in muffled gibberish, which earns her a sharp rebuke from Canon to have some manners as a lady. Canon then turns her attention to Turu with a smug grin, noting that she has grown into a fine woman. Theo tries to mediate the situation, while Cheryl happily notes how well the girls get along. Turu isn't having it, snapping back that while people change, Canon's flat chest hasn't changed at all. Canon yells that they aren't exactly friends, and Turu screams in agreement that they definitely do not get along. Captain Yui approaches the group, observing with a smile that no matter how they deny it, the two girls seem to get along well. Theo greets her and asks if she's on patrol, but Yui explains she is off duty today. She politely asks if she might join them. Canon jokingly asks if they should be captured, and Theo admits they are totally slacking off from practice. As they walk, Yui asks what they are up to. When Theo explains they are practicing for the Hero Festival dance, Yui misunderstands and gasps in horror, asking if Theo is going to be a dancing priestess. Theo quickly corrects her, saying that would be ridiculous, and clarifies that it's Ray who is performing. Yui freezes completely, repeating the words "my sister," in total shock. Yui is still trying to wrap her head around the situation. She tells her sister she didn't know she was even interested in dancing. Ray casually mentions she only started 3 days ago. Yui presses on, asking if she's interested in the title of dancing priestess, but Ray bluntly answers that she's never even seen one. Yui stammers, totally confused about why she's entering the contest if she doesn't care about the title. Ray finally reveals her true motivation with a beaming smile. She just wants the championship prize knife. Yui slumps, realizing that makes perfect sense for her sister. Theo looks shocked by the interaction, but Yui just sighs. She tells Ray it sounds like she's still living an enviable life, admitting she was a fool to look for a deeper meaning. Theo tries to interject that he hasn't even said anything yet, but his stomach betrays him with a loud growl. Taking the cue, Canon mentions she's hungry, and Ray demands a hearty main dish. Theo gives in, sighing that he'll cook something at home, which causes the two girls to immediately cheer. Lady Turu pumps her fists and excitedly suggests they all eat together. The group looks back at her in surprise. She suddenly gets a bit shy, fidgeting with her fingers as she mumbles that food tastes better when they share it. Nearby, Lady Cheryl enjoys a skewer while Yui and Alba look on with smiles. Theo agrees enthusiastically, telling Turu that's exactly right and praising her mature way of thinking. The whole group cheers for the meal plan. However, Turu immediately flips out, yelling at the sky about being treated like a kid and threatening to stage another rebellion. Soon enough, the table is filled with roast chicken, steaks, and salads. The dinner party is a hit. Canon, Ray, and Theo chat while they eat, Cheryl and Turu enjoy their meal together, and Yui shares a drink with the butler, Alba. Eventually, the guests wave goodbye, leaving behind a table full of empty plates. As night falls with a full moon overhead, Theo is left at the sink tackling the cleanup. Theo scrubs the plates, thinking about how much everyone ate. He admits it was worth the effort, but cooking 9 servings at once has left him pretty tired. As he works, he realizes this is actually his first hero festival. He reflects on his past, remembering that back in his days with the Night Order, they never would have approved going out for fun like this. He smiles to himself, genuinely looking forward to the festival. We get a flashback into Melia's home life, and it's pretty brutal. A sharp slap echoes through the room as Melia's mother strikes her across the face, screaming at her to focus and dance properly. The woman looms over her daughter, yelling her name and dropping some heavy pressure. She mentions she heard Ray Silverhorn is joining the contest this year and asks Melia if she really thinks she can get chosen with such half-hearted dancing. She stresses that this year is critical because they're aiming for their 5th consecutive win. She commands Melia to think more carefully about what's at stake. Beaten down on the floor, Melia just quietly agrees, whispering, "Yes, mother." The mother grabs Melia's face, pulling her close with an intense, manipulative stare. She tells Melia to listen carefully, claiming she's saying all this because she cares about her, not out of malice. It's a classic guilt trip. She warns Melia that if she loses her place as a dancer, she's finished, explaining that once a person starts to fall, they keep falling forever. Melia, clearly terrified, says she understands that very well. The mother delivers her final ultimatum with a chilling look: Melia must never lose. Back in her room, Melia sits alone on her bed, the weight of those words hanging over her. She whispers to herself about her mother and the title of Dancing Shrine Maiden. She knows that if she gets chosen for that title, her mother will finally be happy. Her memory drifts to a fancy party scene where guests were gathering around, recognizing them as the Dancing Shrine Maiden's family. In the flashback, the guests are praising the performance, saying everyone was deeply moved. Melia's mother soaks up all the attention, boasting that she's actually the one who taught her daughter to dance. The guests eat it up, talking about how talent must be inherited and how blood will tell. Melia stands there in the background, looking shadowy and disconnected. She narrates that from that day on, seeing her mother happy became her only motivation. That was the only thing that made her smile. That's why she feels like she has no choice. The scene shifts to Melia holding a dark, ominous bottle. The hooded figure from earlier laughs, telling her he hopes she likes it. He calls it a present from him to her. Melia immediately panics, asking if he's telling her to use poison on her competition. The guy waves his hands, telling her not to jump to conclusions and asking who would do such a thing. He insists nobody said anything about poison, but Melia demands to know what it is if it's not a weapon. Standing in front of a bookshelf, the hooded figure throws his arms open and reveals the truth. He calls it medicine, something even more potent than poison. He explains that if she drinks it, her dormant powers will awaken, calling it a truly wonderful thing. As he leaves, he tells her he's rooting for her. Back in the present, Melia stares at the bottle sitting on her table. She replays his words in her head, hesitating. She thinks that maybe she doesn't need to use something like this, but the temptation and pressure are clearly getting to her. The hooded figure continues his psychological attack on Melia. He looms over her in the shadows, asking if she's really sure she won't use the potion. He reminds her exactly who she's up against, Ray Silverhorn, and points out that everyone already acknowledges Ray's beauty and brilliance. He starts digging into her insecurities about her family, taunting her that she must want to earn honor and gratitude just like her mother did. He delivers the final blow to her confidence, warning that if she fails, her mother will be disappointed and will probably hold a grudge forever. The voice inside Melia's head keeps listing everything at stake: her status, her honor, and even her future destination. It tells her that because she has become just an ordinary woman, everyone around her is going to lose everything. The voice finalizes the torment by telling her it's over. Melia is shown lying in bed, looking absolutely haunted as she wakes up from this nightmare. Melia snaps. She grabs her head and starts screaming for the voices to shut up, repeating it over and over in a panic. She tries to ground herself, declaring loudly that she is a dancing shrine maiden. Desperation takes over as she yells that she won't give that title up to anyone. Staring at the ominous bottle on the table, she tells herself that she cannot afford to lose and swears she won't surrender her position. Staring at her own distorted reflection in the dark liquid of the bottle, Melia vows that she will succeed without fail. Moving on, the story shifts gears. With all these different motives mixed together, Melia's desperation, the noble's expectations, and the adventurer's hopes, the big day finally comes. We see Lady Turu and her mother arriving in town, the dance team wrapping up their practice, and Yui leading her knights through the streets. The sun rises on the big morning. Theo throws open the shutters of his window with a loud clatter. He looks out, checking the sky, and notes with satisfaction that there isn't a cloud in sight, exclaiming what a beautiful day it is. It is finally the day of the hero festival.